The events begin with Gigist, who is haunted by nightmares of fire and blood, waking up in a panic. At that moment, his wife Elena enters and suggests he take a work break because he's wearing himself out. He reassures her that he's fine and there's no need to worry. Meanwhile, a news anchor on TV reports that smoke is still rising from the forest, even after 2 days. The anchor mentions that according to investigators, Mont Blanc, the robotic assistant of the Swiss Forestry Department, has been found in pieces in the fire. Mont Blanc was a world-famous mountain guide known for befriending numerous boys and climbers, and he dedicated himself to programming a tree-cutting strategy that allowed humans to coexist with nature. The anchor then expresses condolences to the public for the loss of Mont Blanc. At this point, Gigist turns off the TV and receives a call from his workplace. He tells Elena he's heading to work and suggests they go on a trip when he gets a chance to take a vacation. Elena admits she didn't expect him to propose that. Gigist then moves on to investigate a case, where a police officer informs him that the victim, Bernard Lanke, was 42 years old and lived in that apartment. He was a prominent activist for laws protecting the rights of robots. Gigist asks if the victim was human, and the officer confirms that he was. Continuing his examination, Officer Wallace informs him that entering the crime scene without permission is prohibited. Wallace's assistant states that Gigist is the envoy sent by Europol. Gigist approaches them and shows his identification badge. Wallace apologizes, explaining that he is an inspector from the city police, and mentions that the place has been turned upside down, so they will need some time to investigate the stolen items. Gigist replies that it doesn't seem like a robbery since there's no sign of theft, only one room was destroyed. Wallace shows him the corpse and asks for his opinion on the victim's death, noting that 2 horns protrude from the victim's head. Meanwhile, the assistant receives a phone call and informs Wallace that someone has breached a checkpoint. Wallace and Gigist rush to the checkpoint with police cars, where Wallace questions the attacked officer and asks if he was attacked alone. The officer painfully responds that his partner, Ruby, the robotic officer of model BRC 1332, was also attacked. Gigist walks over to Ruby, who is lying a few steps away, as Wallace incredulously remarks that a robotic officer could be destroyed so easily. Suddenly, the officer informs Wallace that there is a suspect in his 20s wearing a red hood and covered in tattoos, but he fled to the redevelopment area in the old city. Wallace instructs him to form teams to pursue the suspect, but Gigist does not hesitate and immediately jumps to chase him. Gigist arrives at an old church, where he replaces his hand with a firearm and enters, confronting the suspect, aiming the gun at him and demanding he doesn't resist. The suspect suddenly pulls back in fear, holding a metal rod. Gigist confronts him, stating that there are traces of material from the robotic officer on the rod. Before the suspect can reply, Gigist notices that he is high on a drug called Noi, and that he consumed it only 40 minutes ago. Gigist asks the suspect about the dealer of Noi, to which the suspect answers that a man named Schultz lives on Karl Heinz Street. Gigist asks when he met him, and the suspect replies it was before dawn today. Gigist tells him that if the drug dealer confirms this, he'll have an alibi because that time is close to when Bernard was killed. The suspect asks if Bernard was murdered. Gigist accuses the suspect of attacking the officer with the rod to avoid arrest for possession of illegal substances and for the destruction of the robotic officer, Ruby. He informs him that he can arrest him peacefully. The suspect lunges at Gigist with the metal rod, but Gigist dodges the attack, kicks the suspect, and aims his gun at him. The suspect pleads not to be shot, and Gigist calms him, assuring him that his gun fires tranquilizing gas. Gigist explains that he is also a robot designed not to harm humans. Afterward, Gigist visits Ruby's home, introducing himself as a private investigator from Europol. Ruby's robotic wife greets him, and she begins to explain that since Gigist is a robot, he can surely mimic humans in drinking tea, though an old-fashioned robot like herself finds it hard to perceive that pleasure. She pours tea for Gigist, saying she works as a maid for a family that has a human son, but they adopted a dog before the child was born, so the child and the dog grew up as siblings. The dog later died, and at that moment, Gigist asks if she would like to erase a part of her memories. The robot pleads with him not to erase her memories of her husband. Later, Gigist returns to continue the investigation into Bernard's case and examine the evidence. Wallace comments that there must have been people targeting Bernard since he was an activist for robot rights. Another investigator then asks about the 2 horns surrounding the corpse. Gigist pulls out a memory card and places it inside, then projects it onto the screen, revealing a location resembling the spot where the robot Mont Blanc was destroyed. Gigist states that destroying a powerful robot like Mont Blanc is impossible for humans, and at the time of the crime, there were no signs of a human in Bernard's apartment. Wallace reminds him that Bernard was human. Gigist tells him he is aware that Article 13 of the law prohibits harming or killing a robot by a human. Wallace remarks that a human-killing robot case would be the first one in 8 years. Gigist responds that he will find the perpetrator, whoever it may be. Gigist then travels to the Alps and stands in front of a concrete base where a bronze statue of Mont Blanc was previously planned to be built. However, Mont Blanc opposed this, arguing that the statue would ruin the view of the Alps. Someone told Gigist that Mont Blanc joined the 39th Central Asia War as part of the peacekeeping forces and helped the Persian kingdom restore peace amidst chaos and destruction. Mont Blanc also captured hiding terrorists without bloodshed, and without him, peace wouldn't have spread across Asia. He was also a poet who sang with birds and spoke to trees. The man continued, saying that the workers in front of him volunteered to work for free because they loved Mont Blanc, the the Guardian Mountain. Hundreds of thousands would attend his memorial over the next 3 days. Then the man firmly stated that Mont Blanc's death was not an accident, as he was completely destroyed. It was said he died from the great hurricane that struck just before the forest fire, but this was not true. The man asked Gyges to hold the responsible party accountable. Gyges then woke up inside a maintenance bay for robots and was informed by Dr. Hoffman that his routine maintenance was complete. Gyges thanked him, and Hoffman mentioned that a robot like him, so closely resembling humans, could feel fatigue. Gyges echoed the word fatigue, and Hoffman explained that it seemed he was dealing with tough issues. He elaborated that he had seen Mont Blanc's memorial on TV, where it was claimed that Mont Blanc destroyed himself due to an electromagnetic wave that coursed through his body. However, as an expert on such matters, he didn't believe a powerful robot like Mont Blanc could experience such a problem. Gyges remained silent while Hoffman continued, acknowledging that he knew about Gyges' complicated case. He had seen Bernard on TV several times, and Bernard's targeting wasn't a surprise, as he was known for his sharp tongue and contempt for everyone, so he must have had enemies, unlike Mont Blanc. Hoffman then empathetically noted that handling 2 such cases would surely exhaust him. Gyges asked Hoffman if a normal human could sneak into a room without leaving any organic trace. Hoffman replied that he would think about it until their next meeting, as this place was supposed to be his safe haven, so they would stop discussing those cases. Gyges mentioned that he had offered his wife a trip as a vacation. Hoffman responded that traveling was good, and data showed it produced positive results for artificial intelligence. He suggested Gyges go to Japan, recalling his invitation from a tech expert there and noting how fascinating Tokyo was. Gyges said he would talk to his wife about it. Hoffman then inquired about the dream that haunted him, assuring Gyges that he wasn't trying to extract information but was surprised by the dreams generated by artificial intelligence, where it was scientifically proven that AI also has a subconscious. However, it was rare for a robot to have actual dreams. Hoffman asked him to share more about his dream whenever he was ready. He added that the psychoanalyst Freud said, "Dreams are expressions of reality, not mere products of human imagination." As Gyges exited the lab, he observed a garbage worker pushing a cart with a robotic police officer. Gyges stopped the worker and asked if the robot was a police unit. The worker replied that forensic analysis for that robot had been completed, and they would dispose of it. Gyges asked if he could take a look at it, and the worker allowed him, stating that the robot was essentially just scrap metal. He also mentioned he could sell the whole robot for 500 Zeus. Shortly after that, Gyges returned to Ruby's wife and handed her a memory chip belonging to her husband, expressing that he thought she would want to keep it. She gratefully accepted it and asked him to insert Ruby's memory into her. Gyges warned her that memories could sometimes be painful, but he placed it in for her and assured her that he would remove it immediately if anything went wrong. Suddenly, he noticed a malfunction occurring with the robot. Gyges tried to stop it and extract the memory chip, but it said it was seeing something in Ruby's memories. The robot then displayed a clip of Ruby's partner stopping a suspect's car at a checkpoint. At that moment, the suspect attacked Ruby and his partner with a metal bar. The robot observed that Ruby was ready to use a stun gun in direct response to the criminal, but something distracted him. It then replayed the clip, and Gyges noticed an unidentified flying object coming from behind the building where Bernard was killed. He asked the robot to freeze the clip and zoom in on the image. Gyges was surprised that the forensic analysis hadn't detected that object. The robot admitted it wouldn't have spotted it either if it weren't for Ruby's memory chip, as Ruby had seen this object for a moment and analyzed its identification system. However, the object was not robotic. After that, Gyges drove and began analyzing the events of both cases, Mont Blanc's case and Bernard's murder. He then visited a facility where the official asked him if he was a robot. Gyges affirmed that he was. The official provided him with protective headphones against electromagnetic waves, explaining that if he got too close to Bravo, his system could be damaged due to the high electromagnetic waves it emitted. Gyges reassured him that he was resistant to those waves, being made from a special alloy. The official warned him to be cautious, as 4 robots had fallen victim to Bravo 1589. Gyges moved further into the facility, bypassing some barrier. He then saw the Bravo robot, which was tightly secured by a very harsh protective system. Bravo welcomed him, saying he was the most advanced robotic investigator. Gyges remarked that Bravo's identification system still appeared to be operational. Bravo confirmed, saying his system had become even more sensitive than before. Since he was deprived of movement, his curiosity about what was happening outside was killing him. Gyges informed him that a law professor named Bernard Lanky had been murdered, with no human traces at the crime scene. He asked if the killer was human or robotic, and why a robot would kill a human. Bravo mentioned that they must have thought the criminal AI experienced some malfunction, but he had witnessed no malfunction at all. Bravo then suggested to investigator Gyges that if he wanted to learn more about the perpetrator, he should exchange his memory chip. Perhaps he could learn something new. Gyges offered him printed photos of the devastation of Mont Blanc and Bernard's murder, asking him about the significance of such horns. Bravo explained that the of death in Europe was depicted with similar horns, and that the hunter Herne, who took the souls of warriors, was also referred to as the king with horns. In Greek mythology, Hades, the king of the underworld, was known as Pluto. Bravo returned the photos to Gyges, declaring that whoever was responsible would strike again. He clarified that considering Mont Blanc, the strongest of robots, was easily destroyed. The best robots made with the finest available global technologies must be capable of creating weapons of mass destruction. In a distant palace, there was a blind musician named Duncan who was approached by the new head servant. He was informed that the security system was down. Duncan replied that no thief would come to such a desolate place to steal from him. Then he asked if the servant was indeed the new head servant, to which the servant confirmed. Duncan inquired about his name after dismissively calling him useless. The servant replied that his name was North, and Duncan mockingly commented on his name, saying the employment agency had told him he had a military background. North assured him he was indeed the head servant for the British Army's supreme commander during the 39th Central Asian War. Duncan remarked that he certainly looked rugged. North replied he wore a cloak in front of others. Duncan, understanding, quipped that his whole body must then be a weapon, and he ordered North to prepare tea. North assured him he would, and he could be sure that all his data was stored securely. Pouring the tea, North mentioned he had watched a movie about the Queen via satellite and was moved by the harmony of the images and the music. Duncan asked if that was stored in his data too, to which North replied no, affirming that he was touched deeply. Duncan informed him that the film was over 10 years old, emphasizing that all its songs had achieved tremendous success. He had received many musical awards and was praised as the blind music genius, but later was accused of losing his talent. Duncan added that if he wanted to, he could compose countless film scores since his genius was still alive, but he was the one refusing to continue. North replied he had just heard Duncan working on a new piece. Duncan said it was a special piece just for him. Then Duncan sipped his tea, pouring it out before North, saying the tea tasted bland, just like his name. North responded that his piece was beautiful. Duncan scolded him, asserting that a military robot like him had no right to speak of art. Later, while having dinner, Duncan asked North how many people he had killed in the Central Asian War. North replied that international robot laws criminalized harming humans. Understanding, Duncan remarked that he must have killed his own kind, and asked how many casualties there had been. North remained silent, leading Duncan to order him to leave. North walked away but was curious about playing Duncan's piano. When North began to try it, Duncan angrily ordered him not to play the piano. North curiously asked why he had so much modern and leading musical equipment but only used the piano. Duncan replied that they were just fake machines, just like him. Anything that can be seen using it is fake, because the real scene is in his memory. North, puzzled, repeated, "The real scene?" Duncan explained that the landscapes of his hometown are etched in his mind from when he was sighted, as a child in Bohemia. He began to list the natural vistas of his hometown, saying he would turn that scene into music. The next day, North tried playing the piano again, but Duncan reminded him he had previously forbidden him from touching it. North apologized, but Duncan continued to scold him, emphasizing that all the notes from the film would become fake if a machine like North played the music. North turned to him, apologizing for his intrusion, and mentioned he had heard him moaning in his sleep the night before, which sounded somewhat like a hum. He believed that hum would fit the composition he was working on. North attempted to mimic Duncan's humming on the piano, but Duncan ordered him to leave the house. North admitted he was trying to learn how to play the piano, even if it would seem fake as Duncan had told him. He wanted to get as close to real playing as possible. Duncan told him a machine like him could never play and insisted he stop touching his piano because it belonged only to the battlefield. North replied he wanted to learn to play, so he would never have to return to that battlefield. The next day, Duncan awoke from his usual dream of chasing after his mother in wide fields, begging her not to leave. He then felt for his glasses and asked North why he had entered his room despite being told not to. North told him breakfast was ready. Duncan sat down to eat, recalling that he had kicked North out but was surprised to hear him playing the piano. He rushed to the piano room, angrily asking North how many times he had told him not to touch it. North pleaded to let him show how much he had improved and promised to play the tune he had been humming. As North began to play, Duncan exploded with anger, knocking over his musical instruments and declaring that what he was playing wasn't music at all. North told him that was how he was destroying his instruments. Duncan asked how many of his kind North had destroyed, then pointed his stick at him, demanding he take off his cloak and show his weapon to the world. North fell silent while Duncan said he would teach him because of his true moans. He revealed he had been seeing a nightmare for years, which was actually his true past, not a nightmare. His real name was Paolo Holly, born in Bohemia, where his father died when he was young. Unfortunately, he suffered from a debilitating illness from birth that gradually made him lose his sight, so he turned to singing, his only source of joy. His mother was a beautiful woman who attracted men merely by crossing the street until one approached her and blinded her with his money. At that moment, his mother felt his illness was a burden and abandoned him, sending him to a boarding school in England. There, he was bullied by other students because of his frail body, yet he persisted in studying music. At one point, he fell victim to a persistent fever, fainting in class and moving between hospitals until doctors lost hope for his recovery. Since then, he hadn't heard from his mother. When he surrendered to death, a Japanese doctor appeared without a medical license, claiming he would save his life but might cause him complete blindness. The doctor performed a successful surgery, but over time, his sight diminished further, and he continued studying music until he was completely blind. Later, he learned of his mother's death, but discovered she hadn't married the rich man and died alone. Though she deserved that for abandoning her son, he bought the rich man's mansion and claimed it as his own, changing his name from Paolo Holly to Duncan. He became the world's leading composer, purchasing purchasing the mansion because his mother had long desired it, only to abandon it for him. Now, he intended to transform the wonderful scene his mother left in their homeland into music. North tried to speak, but Duncan ordered him to be silent, saying he would write him a recommendation letter to leave. Later, Duncan cruised through the castle garden in his electric chair, hearing North play. During his performance, North was haunted by memories of war and destruction, and when he stopped, Duncan remarked that North's playing had improved slightly. That night, while drinking water in the kitchen, Duncan noticed North charging himself and guessed he would leave the next day. The next day, Duncan continued to play but struggled with his composing. When he called for North, he found he was gone and realized he had left. Duncan spoke with someone about when they would send a replacement for the head servant, who turned out to be Marshall from MCM Film Company. Duncan told him he had fired the robotic butler, prompting silence from Marshall. When Duncan asked what he wanted, Marshall replied he was calling about the music for a specific film and asked if there was a problem. Duncan explained he was from the film industry. Marshall asked for Duncan's opinion about reusing one of his old compositions, which Duncan allowed. Then Russell, from the orchestration center, reached out to Duncan, informing him they rejected his previously discussed piece for several reasons. Russell apologized to Duncan. Afterward, Duncan roamed the garden in his electric chair, remembering North's words about his new piece. He returned to the piano, recalling his past of chasing his mother as a child, trying to prevent her from leaving. Suddenly, Duncan stood up, grabbing his cane to smash the piano, but North stopped him, saying he had returned after going to his hometown, Bohemia. Duncan asked why he had gone there, and North replied he had gone to collect songs and had managed to find the tune he had been humming in his sleep. When North tried to sing the tune, Duncan ordered him not to intrude on his nightmare any further, insisting that people have painful memories they wish to erase. North told him his memories deserved to be erased. He was just a weapon who destroyed countless machines in the Central Asian War, killing tens of thousands like him. That's why his artificial intelligence continued to replay those scenes in his mind. North went on to say he met an old man in Bohemia who was familiar with folk songs, particularly the one he hummed. The old man told him its singer was his mother. Duncan fell silent as North continued that his mother hadn't abandoned him during his illness. She had contacted a millionaire named Jonathan Thorne to secure his treatment, possibly allowing her to bear the staggering medical expenses that saved his life. She had been by his side when he lost his sight, but left after realizing how much he hated her. North continued, saying that the village elder had told him how he always held his mother's hand, singing with her at sunset in the fields of their hometown. North then sang, causing Duncan to remember his past and break down in tears. North told him it was just a song from a machine, but his dream wasn't a nightmare like Duncan's. Duncan ordered him not to return to the battlefield again and promised he would teach him the piano. Later, Duncan connected with North and continued to train him on the piano. One day, North heard a noise and said something was approaching the castle. Duncan asked if a friend was coming to visit, and North inquired if he had heard about Switzerland, informing him that a tornado had struck about 100 kilometers away moments ago. North then went out onto the balcony, declaring a threat was approaching. When he saw the black smoke in the sky, he discarded his cloaks, revealing his weapon-clad body, and soared into the sky. Duncan called after him, asking what was happening. Soon, the clouds cleared after a fierce battle, and Duncan heard the song spread through the sky before something exploded and fell to the ground. Duncan hoped North would return home. Meanwhile, Gigisht met a boy named Adam, and he assured Adam he was pleased to meet him. Events continued to unfold as Detective Tawish stood before a new victim, found hanged in an unknown location. His assistant informed him that the victim's name was Junichiro Tazaki, a law professor who had previously proposed international robot laws. Tawish asked his assistant if it meant that Junichiro was the one who granted robots the freedom to be treated equally to humans, and his assistant confirmed it. Tawish then ordered him to investigate anyone opposing robot rights. He wondered how the victim's home could be destroyed in such a manner. Forensic experts informed him they were analyzing it, to which Tawish remarked that it should be easy for them. He grumbled that the method of the victim's murder reminded him of a case he had read about before, where the victim had horns as well. His assistant noted that there were indeed two cases with similar characteristics, the case of the robot Mont Blanc in Switzerland and the case of law professor Bernard in Germany. Tawish decided he needed to reach out to the investigators working on those cases and was informed that investigator Gigest was in charge of both and that he was also a robot. Meanwhile, Gigest was sitting in a cafe with Adam, where he confessed to Adam that whenever he tried to activate his recognition system to determine if Adam was human or not, his system failed. He noted that he had seen Adam several times in magazines following their discovery during the Central Asian War, as the media had made a huge fuss about him at that time. However, meeting him in person was a different matter altogether. When the waitress arrived to serve Adam dessert, he cheerfully stated it was food time. Gigest remarked that he was sure Adam didn't mimic humans when it came to drinking tea, as he could see Adam genuinely enjoying the food. Adam replied that the more he mimicked that behavior, the more he enjoyed it. Gigest asked if that was why Adam had collected mollusks in the rain brain when they first met, and whether collecting those mollusks gave him a sense of life. Gygest was convinced that Adam's artificial intelligence was more advanced than his own, despite Adam still being a child. Adam responded that he was sold to the circus despite that. Gygest expressed surprise, and told him he wanted to meet him because he was in danger following the murder of Mont Blanc in Switzerland and North in Scotland, as he was one of the most advanced of the 7 robots in the world. Adam was shocked. Gygest clarified that he had no evidence of their murders yet, but their killer aimed to destroy the most advanced of the 7 robots globally. Adam asked why, and Gygest speculated that he knew the reason. Adam requested to read Gygest's memory chip, explaining that he might find clues that could help solve the case through what he had seen or heard. Initially, Gygest refused, stating that his memory contained sensitive data about other cases and his personal life. However, remembering that Adam's intelligence was more advanced than his, he trusted him and handed over his memory chip. Adam inserted it into himself and quickly returned it to Gygest, who instructed him to delete any information unrelated to the case, while hoping he would provide him with any overlooked details. Adam stood up, stating he would head to the bathroom, explaining that he had developed that habit from mimicking human behavior. Gygest understood and allowed him to go, but once inside the bathroom, Adam began to cry. Later, Gygest continued walking with Adam in the rain. Adam asked him if he would leave Japan immediately. Gygest affirmed that he had much work ahead and wanted to speak with 3 other robots regarding the case. Adam asked him to visit him again, which Gygest promised to do, but then Adam surprised him by stating that his wife was beautiful. Gygest abruptly stopped, explaining that this was why he hadn't wanted to allow Adam to read his memory chip. Adam laughed, and Gygest yelled at him not to mock adults and to delete the data from his memory immediately. Adam continued to laugh, assuring Gygest that he and his wife would be fine, and that no matter how bad things got, they would get through it. Gygest thanked him and bid farewell, stating they would meet again. In the forensic department at the Capitol Police Headquarters, Tawash asked his assistant about the cause of death for the victim. The assistant replied that it was suffocation. Tawash asked if the weapon was a rope then, and the assistant said they didn't know yet, revealing that the victim's neck had experienced significant pressure, but there were no traces of evidence. Tawash ordered a 3D display of the crime scene. Later, Detective Tawash and his assistant Nakamura went to the crime scene, where they were surprised by Adam's presence. Tawash questioned who permitted him to intrude onto the crime scene. Adam presented his entry permit and reminded Tawash that he asked for Europol's assistance in the investigation. Adam clarified that he had uploaded investigator Gygest's memory, who was responsible for both cases, and he now had data on Mont Blanc and the North case. Tawash realized that Adam's nature as a robot allowed him to exchange memory contents with Gygest, but still cautioned him that it would be a mistake to think he knew everything since robots didn't comprehend beauty or the enjoyment of food. Then Tawash looked off into the distance and said that perhaps only a robot could understand this case better since the perpetrator was a robot like them. Adam asked what led him to say that. Tawash confirmed that a human could not commit a crime without leaving some trace behind, as they would leave fingerprints, hair, or some evidence. Adam insisted that he saw green tea among the debris of the crime scene, noticing 2 broken teacups and yoken pastries filled with red bean jelly. Tawash ordered Nakamura's AI system to display that evidence. Adam examined it, confirming that the tea had recently been prepared. Nakamura validated that the autopsy report indicated tea and yoken pastries were found in the victim's stomach. Adam then asked Tawash if he served tea and yoken to a robot when he visited. Tawash replied that robots pretended to eat all the time. Adam moved to another spot in the crime scene, stating that the victim and the killer must have admired the hydrangea flowers in the garden. He instructed Nakamura to display the hydrangea flowers and asked Tawash if he still believed the killer was a robot. Tawash nervously countered, questioning if the killer had destroyed the house with a bulldozer after joyfully admiring the hydrangea flowers. Tawash then ordered the display of witness testimony videos. One witness said it felt like a hurricane, while another claimed she heard a tremendous roar and suddenly saw the neighboring house disappear. A man stated he couldn't believe his own house still stood after such a massive storm. Tawash pointed to the videos, explaining to Adam that witnesses insisted it was an unusually focused tornado to destroy just one house. He asked Adam for his thoughts on this, but Adam did not respond, continuing to examine the area and asserting that Mr. Junichiro went to the garden. Adam requested to view the corpse's image again, but Nakamura refused, stating that they couldn't show the body to a young boy. Tawash reminded him that Adam was still just a robot, so he ordered Nakamura to display the corpse. Once Adam saw the body and noticed the horns, a memory of Gygest overwhelmed him, echoing a voice in his head mentioning that the god of death had horns, just as the lord of the underworld in Greek mythology. Adam echoed in surprise, "Pluto?" and then wondered if the victim had used fountain pens. Nakamura responded that they found ink traces on his middle finger, indicating he had likely used ink. Adam pointed out that the rain washed away most of the ink, but he still detected a small amount on the victim's hand. Adam quickly turned, spotting wet footprints belonging to the victim, and announced that the victim had run from the garden to the house and then to the office. He found a bottle of ink identical to that on Junichiro's hand. When Tawash ordered the bottle to be displayed, Adam speculated that the victim must have dropped it while searching for something. Adam continued to search until he discovered the investigation committee's business cards. prompting Nakamura to inquire about whose card it was. Later, Adam went to a facility where Professor Ochanomizu was arguing with someone, claiming that members of Thracia could say whatever they wanted, but they would not create robots for use in wars. At that moment, Adam interrupted, asking if he had a moment to talk. Ochanomizu, surprised, asked why Adam came to him at this time. Adam inquired whether he had heard of law professor Junichiro Tezaki. Ochanomizu confirmed that he was the one who proposed the international robot laws. He realized he had been in an accident and had died. Adam asked him about the main activist, Bernard Lanke, and Ochanomizu replied that he hadn't seen him in years. Adam informed him that Bernard was also dead, and asked where he had last met him. The professor explained that Bernard was part of a certain investigation committee during the Central Asian War, and they had met there. Adam clarified that Junichiro Tezaki was looking for a business card just before his death, and that card belonged to Professor Ochanomizu. Ochanomizu was surprised and wondered if Junichiro had tried to contact him. Adam confirmed that Junichiro was in danger, and someone might be trying to kill him and the former members of the Bora Investigation Committee. Ochanomizu fell silent, but Adam urged him to tell him about Bora. The professor explained that dictator Darius XIV ruled the Persian kingdom, after which citizens and machines suffered mistreatment that violated United Nations treaties. Darius used a tremendous military force to impose his control over neighboring countries and invade all of Central Asia. At that time, a treaty to ban the production of mechanical weapons of mass destruction was proposed, and the United Nations ratified it. However, suspicion later arose that the Persian kingdom possessed such weapons, leading President Alexander of the United States of Thracia to accuse the Persian kingdom. Based on his accusations, the Bora Investigation Committee was sent to the Persian kingdom, and no one knew if Bora was just a symbol or a term referring to something specific. Nevertheless, Ochanomizu insisted he was a member of the investigation committee along with Bernard and Junichiro, but there was no trace of the weapons of mass destruction Thracia claimed to exist. Adam inquired on what basis Thracia made such claims. Ochanomizu replied that there was a prevailing belief that the advanced army of machines was the brainchild of a genius scientist known as Dr. Guji, but there was no evidence of his existence, and no one had ever seen his face. Then, Ochanomizu bowed his head, confirming that was all they had concluded, but he remembered investigating a deep place beneath an ancient mosque where he encountered piles of dead machines. The Persian kingdom then told them it was a dump for unusable machines. War broke out, Darius's palace fell, and peace was restored in Central Asia thanks to Mont Blanc. In the wrestling ring, Brando was playing in the SKKR Championship, and the final round ended in his victory. He had gone 936 matches without defeat, earning him the title of the strongest warrior in history. Later, Gaijist met with Brando and congratulated him, saying it was an amazing match. Brando shared that sometimes he felt like he couldn't move after a match. Gaijist looked up and contemplated the wrestling suit, saying all wrestlers wore the same suits in the ring, but when Brando wore it, he became the strongest. Brando replied that experience was all a fighter needed to win all matches, while the rest depended on luck. Gaijist repeated in disbelief, "Luck?" Brando explained that humans laugh when a machine talks about luck, but he considered himself a lucky man. Gaijist then walked with Brando, expressing surprise at the old city. Brando mentioned he lived on the top floor, then continued, saying Gaijist must be wondering why a fighting star like him lives in such a shabby place. Brando confirmed he could afford to live in a lavish house with his earnings from fighting, but he chose to invest his money in something else. He opened the door to his apartment, declaring that the king of the fighting world had returned. A group of children rushed to him, taking turns hugging him and calling him their dad. Then, his wife Minnie appeared to welcome him back. Brando introduced her to Gaijist, who informed her he was from Europol. Minnie then prepared dinner, and Gaijist sat down to eat with Brando. One of the children seriously asked Gaijist if he was really a detective. Gaijist confirmed it. The child then inquired about his cool weapon, but Gaijist told him he didn't have a cool weapon. Minnie yelled at the child to stop asking silly questions or she'd punish him, prompting the child to run away. Minnie then apologized to Gaijist, who told her he hadn't enjoyed a meal like this in a while. Brando remarked that having a human meal wasn't a bad idea. Gaijist confirmed that it was a fun meal, and Brando added that it's always like this. At his home, every day feels like a festival. Minnie yelled at Brando to eat his salad, and the kids chimed in that their mother was the strongest in the house because she was a champion in the world. The kids later fell asleep, and Brando had a chat with Gaijist while Minnie prepared drinks, instructing Brando not to overindulge. Brando told Gaijist that he built this life with the money he earned from fighting. He explained that his wife Minnie never knows when he'll return home, so she always ends up staying alone at home, worrying about him. He then began adopting mechanical children, and with each child he adopted, his joy grew. He had 5 children now. Brando expressed surprise, saying he never cared before if he got hurt in a match, but after adopting the kids, he wished to live as long as possible. He no longer wanted to die, and he was sure Mont Blanc wanted to live as well. Brando mentioned he had met Mont Blanc during the Central Asian War, and they shared happy times together, even talking all night about trees and birds, so he couldn't believe that such a great man had died in that way. Then Gaijist asked Brando if he knew a machine named North. Brando said he only knew him by name. Gaijist told him that North had died last week, even though he was living peacefully as a servant for a composer in Scotland. Brando asked if he was murdered, and Gyjist confirmed that he was. He added that he was also in danger, but Brando reassured him not to worry about him because he was the king of the fighting world. Gyjist insisted that was why he was being targeted. Brando said he was waiting for them to seek revenge for Mont Blanc's death, but Gyjist urged him not to be foolish and to contact him if anything came up. Later, Brando strolled with Gyjist, who commented that he had a great day with him. Brando asked him to visit again, then told him the boys were wonderful and suggested that he should consider adopting as well. Suddenly, a memory of the garbage worker popped into Gyjist's mind, reminding him that he could get a whole machine body for money, which made him feel pain. When Brando noticed him acting strange and asked what was wrong, Gyjist replied that he had overindulged in drinking. Brando then asked if he would be able to return home, and Gyjist reassured him he was fine. Brando asked him to call him if anything happened because he was lucky to have a family. He then bid farewell to Gyjist, who continued on his way, wishing Brando wouldn't die and leave him alone. In the wrestling ring, a match was underway, with Hercules, called the Battle, dominating his opponent. He nearly tore his opponent's arm off with a deadly grip. The fight ended with the audience cheering for Hercules and celebrating his victory. It was announced that Hercules would face European champion Brando next month. Later, Gyjist met Hercules and commented on the impressive memorial erected for him, saying it was a magnificent monument. Hercules replied he hadn't wanted it because he thought it would spoil the historic site, but he ended up with a statue in a wrestling suit. Gyjist told him he had watched his match yesterday, and he was strong as always. Gyjist offered Hercules to sit down and have some tea, but Hercules declined, stating he doesn't mimic humans because he is a destruction robot who only crushes his opponents. Gyjist countered that in his last match, and before he could finish, Hercules asked him if he thought he had become weak and hesitated to crush his opponent yesterday. He then asked if Gyjist was worried about the upcoming match against Brando since he went to see him. Gyjist replied that he indeed went to see Brando, and he was in great shape. Hercules affirmed that he had fought Brando several times and knew he was as strong as ever. Hercules then asked Gyjist if he knew why humans built memorials. He answered that humans forget, so they build them before their memories fade. Meanwhile, machines retain their memories unless they erase them, explaining that their comrades in arms are mountains of dead machines on both sides. However, since he learned this feeling, he couldn't destroy his opponents anymore. Hercules then asked Gyjist what that feeling was called among humans. Gyjist told him it was called mercy. On the other hand, while Brando was standing in his yard remembering Mont Blanc and how people gathered around him and loved him, his children suddenly interrupted him, asking if he hadn't promised to take them to the zoo. Brando apologized, saying he had some business to take care of. He promised them that he would accompany them next time, explaining that it's the promise of a man, and men never break their promises. However, Minnie intervened, asking the children to stop complaining because she would join them. She then asked Brando about the sudden interview, and he informed her that he had a dialogue with Miss Istanbul, as he owed it to an editor he knew and couldn't refuse it. Minnie wished him enjoyment in his interview and left. Later, Brando borrowed a cargo truck from the fighting place and took his combat suit without permission. He then drove the truck around, when someone called him and warned that he would be barred from fighting if anything happened to the truck or his combat suit. Brando replied that he borrowed the vehicle to prepare for the upcoming Hercules match. On the other hand, Adam was with Okonomizu in his car, wondering if the cause of those accidents was robotic. Okonomizu informed him that the only instance where a robot killed a human was the incident with Bra 1589. Adam asked about Bra 1589's flaws, and Okonomizu explained that Bra was an ideal artificial intelligence with no flaws found. Adam expressed surprise. An ideal AI killed a human? He then wondered if Bra could be human. Brando soon stopped his truck by the Black Sea, confirming that it was the right place to do what he wanted. He took out his combat suit and, wearing it, stood outside the truck looking at the sea as it began to churn wildly, as if a storm was approaching. At that moment, he contacted Gyjist, who was with Hercules at the time. Gyjist asked Hercules to receive the signal and also informed Adam, so all three quickly understood that Brando was declaring war to take revenge on the killer of Mont Blanc. Gyjist and Hercules immediately moved to save Brando after locating him, but the signal was unclear. On the other side, Adam informed Okonomizu that someone was attacking Brando, and they needed to hurry to save him. Suddenly, all three received a signal simultaneously, noting that this thing was extremely powerful, and they plunged into what felt like a dark path. They wondered what was happening and started calling out for Brando, but he didn't respond at first. Then the sea calmed and returned to normal, and Brando's voice came through, saying he had overcome and defeated that thing, but it had gotten to him as well. Hercules urged him to hold on, but Brando informed him he was excited about their next match. Hercules said they were coming to rescue him, but Brando stated he would send them the information he had analyzed about the creature he just fought. However, when Brando tried to stream images of that creature, the transmission was too distorted, only showing Minnie and her children during the broadcast. Brando apologized to his friends, saying he couldn't control it, then asked Gyjist to tell his children he was a lucky man, and they shouldn't worry about him. Then the signal disappeared between Brando and his companions. As Gyjist hovered over the sea, Hercules noticed oil floating on the water's surface and a huge amount of debris on the seabed. Just then, Adam called to them and asked if they had noticed anything that mixed with the signals Brando sent. Gyjist asked if there was a signal from someone other than Brando. Adam replied that it was a signal from a different AI that had gone out of control, resembling noise. Okonomizu then asked him to display the broadcast on the screen. When they all viewed it clearly, Adam guessed that it was what humans called death incarnate. It was later announced on television television that many people had gathered at the Blue Mosque in Istanbul to mourn their hero, Brando. The reporter said he was at the scene of the incident, but the seabed was completely covered in debris, with both police and the military continuing to search for parts of Brando. Meanwhile, Hercules was standing by the sea, lost in thought, refusing to continue fighting while his employer threatened him with a lawsuit for breach of contract if he rejected the matches. Hercules turned to the man and said in despair that the search team hadn't found any part belonging to the killer and that all they had found were crushed parts belonging to Brando alone. Hercules then wondered why there were no traces of the killer, considering Brando had faced and defeated him. The man asked why he was bothering to search for battle debris and spending his own money when the military and police had abandoned it. He then informed him that his fans were waiting for his return to the ring. At that moment, the search team reported that they had found Brando's arms on a rock at the reef about 100 kilometers away, not on the seabed. Hercules quickly jumped into his vehicle and headed to the rock with the search team. He examined the area himself until he found Brando's memory chip, realizing the killer had not been killed yet when he found Brando's arms positioned like horns. Somewhere, Inspector Nakamura was pondering the extent of the damage caused by an incident. It was reported by an officer that the incident was not just a localized tornado, it only destroyed a single truck used for transporting animals, which contained just 5 animals: a lion, 2 tigers, and a cheetah. Suddenly, another officer rushed over to inform Nakamura that a child was surrounded by these animals. Nakamura immediately ran with the officer to check on the situation, wondering if there was any way to save the child. The officer assured him that the rescue team was ready, while another officer insisted they needed to take out all 5 animals at once. At that point, Nakamura ordered an increase in the number of sharpshooters. Meanwhile, a little girl crossed the police line and approached the child trapped by the animals, shocking Nakamura as he thought, "What is that girl doing?" But the girl calmly talked to the animals, reassuring them not to be afraid. The animals moved toward her and gathered around her. Seeing this, the police rushed toward the child and aimed their weapons at the animals. The girl turned to Nakamura and said that the weapons frightened the animals. Nakamura was stunned, repeating the girl's name, Oran. Later, in Nakamura's office, he asked Oran if the lion truly felt fear and whether she sensed it, explaining that she traveled 3 kilometers from her school to comfort him. Oran confirmed that. Someone asked if she could feel the animal's fear despite the distance, to which Oran replied, "Of course." A man smiled and told Nakamura that Oran had an amazing ability. Uran then asked if she could leave. As Uran exited the office alongside Nakamura, Adam crossed her path and apologized to Nakamura for the troubles caused by his sister Uran, who had calmed the big cats and helped save the child. Nakamura told her she deserved the public service award, but Uran said she didn't want something boring like that. She continued, saying the lion should be her award. Adam apologized to the inspector again for Uran's behavior. He then confronted Uran, asking how many times he had to tell her not to stray from the school route. She replied she couldn't help herself. Outside the police facility, an officer directed Adam and Uran toward the human gate, but Adam insisted they needed to pass through the non-human gate. The officer remarked that distinguishing between humans and androids had become difficult. As Adam crossed the monitoring gate, he felt something unusual upon encountering someone's face. On the other side, Tawash welcomed the same man who had just walked past Adam, introducing himself as a member of the Tokyo Police Department. He asked Nakamura to bring a translation machine to communicate with the man, who responded that he spoke Japanese. Tawash shook hands with him, expressing that he expected nothing less from the greatest genius in Central Asia. Tawash then invited the man to sit, addressing him as Professor Abdullah. As Abdullah sat down, Tawash inquired whether his visit was part of rebuilding efforts after the war. Abdullah confirmed it, stating he was in Tokyo for a global scientific conference. Tawash mentioned knowing that Abdullah had visited Japan 3 months earlier and met Professor of Law Junichiro Tazaki. Abdullah did not deny it and acknowledged reading the shocking news of Junichiro's death. He asked why such a great man had to be killed. Tawash replied that he was the last person to see Professor Junichiro before his death. Abdullah remained silent as Tawash reassured him that he was not a suspect since the incident occurred while his plane was about to take off. Tawash asked if he noticed anything unusual during his visit to Professor Junichiro. Abdullah responded that since Junichiro was the first to propose international laws for androids, he shared his true wish for humans and androids to coexist. Meanwhile, Uran told Adam that androids have feelings much deeper than humans assume, but they struggle to express themselves. She continued, saying it said that distinguishing between humans and androids is only possible with a monitoring gate, but she knows the difference right away because humans display complex expressions on their faces. When Uran turned to Adam to mimic human facial expressions, he told her he couldn't identify the gender of the man who passed them at the monitoring gate, whether he was human or android. Meanwhile, Tawash and Nakamura were seeing Abdullah off at the monitoring gate. Tawash thanked him for his assistance. As Abdullah passed through the gate, it lit up red, and an alarm went off. Nakamura shouted at the officer to turn off the alarm. Abdullah then turned back to Tawash and Nakamura, apologizing for losing most of his organic body parts during the recent war. He then mentioned hearing about the tornado that hit Tokyo that same day and wondered where it had occurred. Somewhere, Uran suddenly felt afraid. Adam reassured her that the big cats were safe now. Uran replied that this feeling only passed through her for a moment. Adam asked if she still felt it, and she replied it was a very faint feeling that she couldn't pinpoint. Looking up at the sky, Uran said lions hide their fear when they experience great terror, then turned to Adam, saying she knew he was now more afraid than the lion. twins. In a place called Gigishet was still staring at a picture of Brando and his family when Helena approached him, offering comfort and affirming that he wasn't to blame for what happened. Gigishet looked at her and suggested they should take a trip. Helena was stunned and asked if he could take a vacation. He replied that management now deemed the attacks on androids to be over. Helena responded that the change would be good, and Gigishet asked her what she thought about going to Japan, recalling that he had visited the country on a business trip and found it to be a beautiful place. Helena agreed to his suggestion. Gigishet then contacted Marco Polo Tourism Company to book a trip for himself and his wife. When he tried to register his wife, the company representative informed him that she was already registered with them. Gigishet, surprised, insisted Helena had never left the European Union before. The representative explained that Gigishet and his wife had previously booked a trip with them but cancelled it. Gigishet, shocked, asked when this occurred. The representative revealed they had requested a visit to Japan 2 years ago. Gigishet recalled that they were in Spain then for training with Europol, and Helena confirmed they lived in Madrid for a year at that time. Later, Gigishet looked back at the photos they had taken together, until Helena reminded him how she had tripped in sunflower fields and disappeared. He had to use his GPS to find her. Gigishet laughed, saying they had taken many pictures. Helena remarked they may have gone overboard capturing too many moments while trying to imitate human behavior. Gigishet said it was enjoyable. Later, Gigishet went for body maintenance at Professor Hoffman's lab, where Hoffman informed him that the maintenance was complete and there was nothing abnormal. All data confirmed everything was fine. However, he believed Gigishet was putting himself under stress. Hoffman then approached Gigishet, advising him not to be too hard on himself about Brando's incident, explaining that human memory is perfectly suited for humans as it helps them forget. Life becomes harsh when clinging to painful memories. Hoffman continued, lamenting that androids have a permanent living memory, and the only solution for their memories is to erase them. Gigishet asked if there was a record of how to delete memories. Hoffman paused for a moment, admitting he wasn't sure. Gigishet then inquired about the ramifications of embedding false memories into his mind. Hoffman said he had heard that this was common in correctional facilities, but androids now had rights. Gigishet asked if someone could have erased memories and replaced them with false ones, which could explain his sadness. Hoffman adjusted his glasses, expressing intrigue at this theory. Later, Hoffman chased after Director Schilling, who told him he was on his way to a meeting but could talk later. Hoffman insisted on a quick chat about whether he had done anything to investigator Gigishet's memory. Schilling suddenly stopped and asked Hoffman how many androids were left in the world at Gigishet's level, capable of switching to a doomsday system. Hoffman replied that there had been 7 androids. Schilling explained that 3 of them had been destroyed in a series of mysterious accidents: Mont Blanc, North, and Brando. Now only 4 remained, one of which was Gigishet. He stated they had invested heavily in Gigishet, and all he needed to do was maintain him well. Hoffman yelled at him, demanding to know what he had done to Gigishet and what he was hiding. However, Schilling continued on his path without answering. Elsewhere, a new murder had occurred, and Gigishet went to investigate it. Detective Versine speculated that the killer was the same one behind previous cases, but Gigishet insisted this was a copycat crime because the perpetrator wore hybrid sneakers to erase his footprints while leaving traces of his movements everywhere. He identified the killer's height and weight using his recognition system and pointed out a drawer, stating the culprit could only handle the knob after removing his gloves. The detective thanked him for his help, apologizing for calling him even though he was on leave. Gigishet asked if this was their second meeting, and the detective replied that they had met in Salzburg 3 years ago, sharing many stories about the war in Central Asia back then. Gigish said he drank 7 bottles of beer at Carl's pub that night. The investigator laughed and said he would love to drink with him again. Gigish drove off, recalling exactly what happened 3 years ago when 4 years had passed since the Central Asian War, which had firmly rooted democracy in Persia. His mind drifted back to the war, where flames and total destruction engulfed the area. At that time, the military police were searching for hiding terrorists, asking residents to evacuate certain areas. When Gigisht entered one place, a man blamed him, saying only children were there, and they had thrown a bomb at his sleeping child. The man then grabbed Gigisht by the collar, questioning where the justice was, and insisting that Gigisht should feel the same way he did then. Gigisht responded, saying he was a machine. He then returned to reality, asserting that his memory was perfect regarding the events from 4 years ago. Somewhere, a boy named Hans was playing on his device when his mother accidentally spilled a drink on it. Hans asked why they didn't get a robot made, stating that all the kids in his class had one. But Hans's father shouted at him, saying his mother was doing her best. He ordered Hans to pay attention and not play during meals. At that point, the wife reminded her husband about their plans for the day, noting it was the anniversary of his brother's death. Adolf, her husband, replied that it had been 3 years since his brother died. His wife expressed disbelief that he had been denied his brother's body for 3 full years. Adolf explained that the law states that authorities hold the bodies of criminals for 3 years. He told her his brother had been good to him and that he wanted to give him a proper burial. Later, as Adolf drove, he heard on the news about an explosion in Berlin the previous day, which led to the death of Judge Neumann from the German Justice Ministry. Judge Neumann was the world's first robotic judge, known for his groundbreaking rulings in cases like Greyfelt, but the cause of the explosion remained unknown. Adolf Adolf called someone to inform them he just heard about the judge's death, and the man responded, "Death to machines." Afterwards, Adolf went to collect his brother's body. The official informed him that according to the Koenig law, 3 years had lapsed since they retained the body, and it was time to return it to the family. The official asked Adolf to sign, to which he inquired if he could have a look at the body. The official advised against it, warning him he wouldn't be able to handle the injuries. Adolf insisted, saying he had been told his brother was shot by a police officer. Adolf then headed to Hofgarten Cemetery but changed direction before arriving and went to Dr. Schiller's office. Schiller asked if he had a complaint about the autopsy report on his brother. Adolf replied he had come to take a look at his brother's body with Schiller, but when Schiller opened the coffin and they both looked inside, they were both shocked. Afterward, Adolf sat down to eat with his wife, who told him that the number of robots had increased, especially in places like restaurants. She continued, stating that robots were said to be capable of thinking like humans. Adolf ordered her not to say such things out loud, as it was considered bias under the robot protection laws. He then got up, telling her he needed to take care of something before heading back home, and ordered her to go home. Meanwhile, Gegish received a report of an armed robbery and was told that the robbers were fleeing in an armed military vehicle. He said he would try to cut them off. At the same time, Adolf's car passed by Gegish's, who arrived quickly at the suspect's location and requested permission to fire. Once allowed, Gegish shot out the suspect's vehicle tires, and the police surrounded it, demanding the suspects raise their hands and surrender. One of the suspects admired Gegish, asking if his weapon was specialized for anti-tank firing. Gegish replied he had to use special ammunition to stop the armored vehicle, and the man asked about that ammunition. Gegish explained it was zirconium shells. Meanwhile, a hidden figure was gathering a group of people, expressing his wish to exterminate all robots from the planet, promising them that he would work to abolish international robot protection laws and eliminate robotic police officers. The man then shouted the slogan, "Death to machines." After his speech, he returned to his office and found Adolf waiting for him, telling him he had just received his brother's body. Although his brother deserved to die, he had been utterly crushed by a weapon that should never be used against humans. It was told to him that only robots could use that weapon. The man was astonished when Adolf informed him that, according to Article 13 of the International Robot Laws, a robot could not harm or kill humans. However, there were a few robots worldwide capable of firing the type of ammunition found in his brother's body, which was the zirconium shell. The man said he knew which robot Adolf was referring to, Investigator Gegisht. He was a robot in which Europol had made its largest investments and had solved many tough cases. He served as a peacekeeping force during the Central Asian War. At that point, Adolf angrily noted that his brother had been a scoundrel, but he didn't deserve to be crushed by a robot. He urged the man to lend him his strength to destroy Gegisht. Elsewhere, someone helped Hercules and handed him a combat suit. Hercules thanked him and asked if he had maintained the suit properly. The man confirmed and warned him that he could lose his fighting license if it was discovered he took the suit without permission. Hercules replied that he was about to retire. He then put on the suit and immediately began testing it, saying, "The right arm feels a bit weak." On the other side, news broke that a robotic police officer had used a zirconium shell a few days earlier. Mr. Wagner, the spokesman for Europol Information Office, was invited to comment on this. Wagner stated that the shell was fired at an armored vehicle. The journalist responded that if the shell had hit a person, it would have crushed them. Wagner asserted that any use of such a shell required presidential permission, emphasizing they cared about protecting human lives. The journalist asked how many robots could fire a zirconium shell, but then turned off the TV and asked Adolf for his opinion on the media program that had been prepared. Adolf told him it would take time. The man replied, "They can add a stigma to Gegisht in the end," to which Adolf said Gegisht would go on a long work vacation, pushing them to act immediately. The man responded that they would not stop slandering him no matter how he tried to escape, and then urged Adolf to be careful not to expose them publicly and incite society against them as anti-robots. Meanwhile, Hercules fell to the ground. His companion ran towards him, making Hercules wonder if what he had just experienced was the energy of photons. Then, Epsilon appeared before Hercules, who told him that his way of greeting was harsh. Epsilon apologized, explaining that he should have stopped him from fighting. Hercules asked if he had become a peace advocate, which is why he hadn't joined the war. Epsilon replied that the war wasn't fair, and Hercules accused him of just being scared and making excuses. Epsilon admitted he was indeed afraid, and mentioned he had been forced to do post-war cleanup operations. He explained that he had faced mistreatment and harassment from everyone, but had gained something valuable by meeting many children and adopting them. Hercules confirmed that he had heard about Epsilon adopting children and raising them, asking, "Could it be that what you gained is love?" Epsilon noted that humans and machines were getting closer, but if they got too close, something bad might happen. On the other side, Adolf went to buy a weapon. The seller informed him of a weapon that was hard to find, made during the Central Asian War but no longer produced or sold. It was an integrated cluster cannon, a guided missile launcher that never missed its target and could tear a machine apart. The seller warned Adolf to be careful with this weapon, as just possessing it could lead to a civilian being accused of attempted murder. Adolf took the weapon and left, remembering how machines had drastically drastically improved production while leaving humans unemployed. His father was one of those jobless victims, and as a child, Adolf would walk behind him, telling him he was hungry. When his father brought him food, one sandwich was never enough, which led his brother to scold him, reminding him that their father was looking for work. In that moment, Adolf saw a few children playing with a ball and wished he had a ball like theirs. His father quickly bought him a brand new ball, but soon after, a machine confronted Adolf's father, accusing him of stealing the ball from the shop. Days later, his father returned home but fell into a cycle of drinking. 3 months later, he committed suicide by jumping off the roof. Adolf's brother continued to care for him until one day, he told Adolf he enrolled him in middle school as he wanted. However, Adolf noticed his brother had an injured arm. His brother reassured him that he had been attacked by a machine but had dealt with it, and urged him to study hard to create a world without machines. Currently, Adolf was determined to track down Geigest and kill him. When he reached Geigest's location, he tried to point the weapon at him, but suddenly saw an enormous amount of energy, and instantly stepped back. Epsilon appeared before Geigest and apologized for summoning him without warning, assuring him that he was the only one with the authority to arrest their enemy. Geigest replied that the enemy was dead after fighting Brando, which was confirmed in a Europol statement. Epsilon refused to believe it, and insisted they had to stop Hercules' upcoming duel. He warned that if they didn't act, a second war would break out. He then asked Geigest if he had heard of the Persian Gulf War syndrome, to which Geigest explained it was about deep psychological damage from war experiences. Epsilon added that the boys he had adopted were also suffering from strong symptoms, especially a child whose entire village had vanished in an instant, leaving him the sole survivor. He recalled a massive monster he saw in the desert, which he called Bora. Meanwhile, Adam urged Oren to hurry to school, but she asked him if he felt a little animal trembling because it couldn't return home. Adam asked if she still felt that way. Oren requested him to think of an excuse for school since she was going to find the animal. Indeed, Oren wandered around searching for it, and eventually reached a restricted area where she noticed a machine curled up on the ground. She wondered if it was the one crying and asked it to hold on while she informed Mr. Okonomizu. However, it asked her to leave it alone. When she inquired about the energy it used, it replied, soul. She told it she had never heard of that before. It explained that the alternative to its energy was AR, and she promised to bring some back for it. Later, the machine thanked Oran for saving it, and when she asked for its name, it said it only remembered it was running away from something very scary. It then pointed to a nearby hut, saying it had stolen clothes from there. Oren informed it that the clothes did not fit. She introduced herself and asked if it had painted the artwork on the wall. The machine clarified it had taken the paint from the hut. When she asked if it was an artist, it replied it didn't know. Oran explained this type of painting was called abstract art, and noted that machines could only paint what they saw. It was rare for a machine to create an image like that. The machine admitted it didn't even know why it had painted. The next day, Oren brought the machine more energy batteries and some paint, also delivering larger clothes. However, she was surprised to find it had completed its painting, which depicted a field of flowers. Oren gazed at the drawing in awe, commenting that its rough sketch wasn't bad at all. The following day, Adam caught Oren before she sneaked out, where she excitedly shared she found a really cute cat. Adam asked if the cat was drinking energy stimulant, to which she asked if he had searched her bag without permission. Oran clarified that it was a robotic cat, prompting Adam to advise her to report it to the Ministry of Science. He asked for its model number, but she confessed she didn't know, as it had been scared and just approached her. Oran promised Adam she would introduce him to the cat once it was ready. Then, she went back to the robot and was stunned to see it had quickly dirtied the clothes she had brought. As she approached to scold it, it told her it had discovered what it was meant to do. Suddenly, it conjured a flower out of thin air, declaring it had recognized its true power. Oran guessed that was why it painted the field of flowers. Later, she learned from the robot that its computer was broken. She mentioned that Ochanomizu said even if it fixed the robot's computer, it would turn into a completely different machine. The robot asked if that meant it would die, and then panic seized it as memories of the desert engulfed it, repeating the name of a giant monster, Bora. Oren calmed it, assuring it was safe. Meanwhile, someone contacted Abdullah, stating he had arrived at Central Park. Abdullah asked if he passed through customs without any issues, and the man confirmed there were no problems and he had reached the site where the last tornado struck. As the man opened his mouth, he vomited a swarm of flying insects. Abdullah then told him he would later inform him of the model number he needed to recover, emphasizing that the body he lent him was crafted with precision. He instructed the man to find the model Pluto. On the other hand, Oren attempted to jog the robot's memory about its past life. The robot moved outside the area and created a large cyclone that made flowers bloom. Suddenly, Okonomizu and Adam arrived at the scene and told Oren to stay away from the robot immediately. Adam informed her that the robot was surrounded by a strange electromagnetic field and explained he had notified the Ministry of Science about it. At that moment, police and Detective Nakamura also showed up. Oran scolded Adam for this. As the robot heard Adam's name, it approached him, filled with hatred. The police attempted to shoot the robot, but Adam stopped them. Soon a strange energy manifested, causing horns to sprout from the robot, and it collapsed. Ochanomizu examined it and was shocked to find its computer was missing. pieces of the building started to crumble down. Meanwhile, a strange machine appeared, and someone said he worked at the development site and had completed a 100-hour shift. However, when he was ready to return home, he discovered his body was offline and missing. Okanamizu asked if that extended body lying before them was his. The person happily replied that he was glad to find his body. On the other side, Abdullah met with his leg and remarked that the benefit of having a robot without its computer was the ability to control it remotely via electromagnetic waves. He then ordered Pluto to return to its body and commanded it not to forget its true mission: to kill Adam. The next day, Professor Ochanomizu was enjoying his day off in the park, but his robotic guardian, Yujiro, was sticking to him like a shadow. So, Okanamizu asked Yujiro to take a short break, explaining that he couldn't really enjoy his holiday this way. Yujiro tried to express that it was for his safety, but the professor insisted that no one would target him on a calm Sunday like this. Plus, a few incidents related to the Bora investigation didn't warrant so much concern. As they spoke, they were interrupted by a small puppy's bark. Okanamizu moved towards the sound and was surprised to find a little robotic dog. He wondered who could have abandoned it. Undeterred, Yujiro warned him not to touch the dog, fearing it might have a bomb. After examining the puppy, Yujiro confirmed it was safe. Okanamizu decided to take it home. Later, as they arrived at Ochanomizu's house, Yujiro asked what he planned to do with the dog. The professor replied he would fix it since he was the head of the Ministry of Science. Afterward, Okanamizu began repairing the dog, noting that its motor was severely damaged, but the real issue lay in its electronic brain circuits. Meanwhile, someone from the Ministry of Defense called to apologize for bothering Ochanomizu on his day off, informing him about a committee meeting scheduled for the following week. They were discussing sending more troops to Persia and needed his approval. Angrily, Ochanomizu made it clear he wouldn't change his mind, stating he wouldn't allow more bloodshed among humans or robots. The caller reminded him that the request for the Thracian territories was still on the table, to which Ochanomizu replied he didn't care because the world didn't create robots to use as weapons. Then, he received a call from his grandson Takashi, who mentioned that the previous storm had veered away from the beach, adding that he was playing with his robotic dog, Bobby. Ochanomizu asked if he got along with Bobby, and Takashi confirmed that while he knew there were newer models than Bobby, Bobby was still the best companion to play with. Takashi then inquired about what Ochanomizu was doing, and the professor told him he was fixing a robotic dog that was much older than Bobby. Takashi suggested they could talk later. Next, Ochanomizu contacted Nakamine Trading Company in search of a KD booster and an RSC guide. The company representative informed him those models were quite outdated and no longer manufactured, mentioning that the specifications had been modified 4 years ago. Ochanomizu thanked him and reflected that it was scientists who had changed the specifications before, and he was determined to change them back. He resumed fixing the dog but eventually despaired, admitting he hoped for help but found none. He sighed, realizing the dog must have fought hard to survive. Overcome with emotion, Ochanomizu wept, noticing the dog still tried to play despite its exhaustion. Early the next morning, Yujiro knocked on the professor's door and informed him that someone claimed to be the dog's owner and wanted to take his identification and conduct a full inspection first. Ochanomizu insisted there was no need for that and asked Yujiro to let him in immediately. Soon, the alleged owner arrived, grateful to Ochanomizu for his efforts with the dog, explaining that he had been searching for it for some time with a tracking device, but didn't expect the great Professor Ochanomizu to be the one looking after it. Ochanomizu offered him tea and asked if he was also a robot. To Ochanomizu's surprise, the man questioned if he felt sad when the dog died, or if he had felt sorrow during the Central Asia War. When Ochanomizu asked who he was, the man introduced himself as Guji, and Ochanomizu recalled that Guji was rumored to have created the robotic army for Persia. Guji then stated that his life was now in Ochanomizu's hands and demanded he call Adam because he needed to fight someone. Ochanomizu shouted back, asking if Guji believed he could force him to summon Adam that way. Guji insisted he had no other choice but to summon Adam to the site of the only cyclone in Japan, which was coincidentally the same location where Takashi was. Meanwhile, the cyclone began to rise from the depths of the sea, and Takashi noticed it. Back at Ochanomizu's side, he remained firm, telling Guji that his threats wouldn't work, and that he wouldn't allow Adam to fight another robot, no matter what happened. Ochanomizu confronted the man, questioning if he truly was Guji. If he was, did that mean the brilliant scientist in Persia was a robot? Guji replied that he didn't know if he was brilliant, but he had indeed created a robot capable of generating cyclones, a very deadly robot. Ochanomizu insisted that robots wouldn't kill humans, as they were designed in accordance with Section 13 of the robot laws, which established a layered security system to eliminate any possible risks. Guji acknowledged Ochanomizu as a great scientist who developed many advanced robots that resembled humans, but he posed a chilling question: what would happen if robots were to become truly human? Ochanomizu reiterated that robots would never kill humans. Guji laughed mockingly, claiming Ochanomizu's stance was hypocrisy, then challenged him to test his hypothesis and find out if he would kill him or not. Ochanomizu pressed Guji for details about who he was, explaining that the Central Asia War began with rumors about Dr. Guji purportedly creating an army of advanced robots for Persia, along with making weapons of mass destruction. Guji asked who had made such claims, and Ochanomizu replied that it had been the United Thracian States, who formed a committee to investigate. Guji inquired about the investigation's outcome, prompting Ochanomizu to state that they hadn't discovered anything substantial, just a large pile of neglected robots. Guji responded that despite not not finding anything, the entire Persian kingdom had been burned to ashes. He then asked if Okanamizu was seeking revenge against the former members of the Bora Investigation Committee. For this reason, he was attempting to destroy Adam and the other advanced robots in the world. At that moment, Takashi called his grandfather to inform him about a strange type of cyclone that didn't move, and Bobby's eyes were glowing. Okanamizu urged Takashi to follow Bobby's guidance, assuring him he would call back later. Guji lamented that there was no other option but to contact Adam. Meanwhile, the police arrived at Okonomizu's house, prompting him to turn to Guji and ask if he had destroyed Yujiro outside, explaining that the police came when Yujiro had stopped sending signals. Guji inquired if he had just been stalling until the police arrived. Suddenly, a loud explosion rocked the ceiling of Okanamizu's house, and Adam appeared in front of the professor, asking if he was all right. Meanwhile, Guji escaped through the hole left by Adam. Adam attempted to pursue him, but Okanamizu stopped him. Outside, an officer instructed the others to chase Guji, while Okanamizu asked Adam how he had arrived. Adam explained that he had received a signal from Bobby, Takashi's dog, immediately contacting the police when he learned something was going on. Outside, the police continued their pursuit of Guji until they found him lying on the ground, from which a swarm of cockroaches surged out, carrying something. The officers soon realized that Guji's electronic brain was missing. Adam informed Okanamizu that Oran had flown to Takashi's house after receiving Bobby's signal. Meanwhile, Oran was heading to Takashi's place as the cyclone intensified. Just then, as Bobby tried to pull Takashi down to the basement, the cyclone suddenly struck the house. In another place, Abdullah was calling for his wife Fatima and his two children Murad and Lulu, as their home had been completely destroyed. The scene changed, and Abdullah returned to reality, where he met a man and asked about Pluto. The man informed him that the Pluto system had already been uploaded, so Abdullah realized that everything had been taken over. Meanwhile, Takashi's house was in ruins as he tried to save his injured mother from the hurricane. Bobby helped him, and together they pulled her to the basement. Bobby then went outside, where Oran arrived and asked him about Takashi and his mother. However, Bobby only trembled, staring at the storm. Oran tried to reassure him and asked about Takashi again. On the other side, the police were on the road, and Ochanomizu was with Nakamura, who assured him he would save his daughter. Ochanomizu claimed he knew who was responsible and asked Nakamura to contact Europol, stating that Dr. Guji, who created an army of robots, was targeting the most advanced robots in the world. At that moment, the robotic officer mentioned that investigator Jigest was handling those cases. Ochanomizu ordered him to call Jigest, informing him that Adam was on his way to the storm site. Meanwhile, Adam was trying to contact Oren but had a weak signal. Oren told him not to come as he should stay away. The hurricane grew stronger, reaching its peak. Adam arrived, ordering Oren to flee with Bobby to the basement. Suddenly, a deep lightning vortex appeared, and Adam dashed toward it, entering the storm. Later, Oren and Bobby awakened to find Adam lying a few steps away. Oren ran to him, wondering if he was dead. Elsewhere, Gigest woke up after a nightmare. Helena rushed to him, asking if he had another bad dream. Gigest reassured her, saying it was different from his usual dreams. Helena suggested he call Professor Hoffman in the morning. Gigest apologized for waking her up, and she explained she was already awake to finish some sketches before their trip. Meanwhile, Adolf was standing on the roof of the building across, aiming his weapon at Gigest, trying to kill him but trembling every time he attempted it. On the other side, someone informed the anti-robot man that Adolf was trying to kill Gigest. The man said he wouldn't allow Gigest to be killed now, as it would turn public opinion against them, ordering to dispose of Adolf instead. The following morning, Gigest met Professor Hoffman and told him he had a different dream yesterday, but he tossed it in the trash, fearing he might remember it. Hoffman praised his action and advised him not to open it, as it might be a virus. He suggested Gigest act like humans do and throw their bad memories in the emotional trash, explaining that people toss their bad memories away. Gigest mentioned that someone was always watching him, whether he was driving or at home. Hoffman told him that his line of work would certainly evoke reactions from others, but he doubted the stalker would follow him to Japan. Hoffman asked if he was leaving that night, and Gigest confirmed it. Hoffman wished him to enjoy the trip and said they would discuss the stalker issue if it bothered him again after he returned. Then, Adolf was driving his car, determined to kill Gigest that day. He quickly changed direction to head to his brother's grave, asking for power to kill Gigest. However, he was shocked when his car exploded and was completely destroyed. He wondered what was happening. At the airport, an announcement instructed travelers to head to gate 68, so Gigest and Helena proceeded there. Helena asked him if he felt better. Gigest replied that it was their first vacation in a long time, so they should relax. Suddenly, he received a call about an explosion. At the same time, the news on TV confirmed the death of the famous robot Adam at 2 in the morning, Central European time. In that moment, Gigest was stunned and began to panic. He asked if the killer was still alive, realizing that the dream coincided with Adam's death. Then he requested to open the dream in his trash. At that moment, in the dream, he saw Adam telling him that he and Pluto were one and the same. Adam questioned him about whether he was the one who killed him. Gigest was then pursued by scattered memories. Helena rushed towards him, and later, in his dream, Gigest saw Dr. Tenma trying to encourage a child named Toby to walk toward him, repeating that Toby walked. Suddenly, Toby disassembled and turned into a robot. In his dream, Gigest also saw his wife Helena telling him that Toby walked. Suddenly, Gigist awoke in Professor Hoffman's lab after Hoffman had ordered to wipe Gigist's memory and reprogram him. When Gigist woke up, Hoffman asked if he was okay. Gigist removed the devices, confirming he was fine, while someone told Professor Hoffman that Gigist's functions had all returned to normal. However, Hoffman tried to convince Gigist that he should rest because he collapsed at the airport, but Gigist insisted on getting up and going since he received an emergency call from work. He quickly put on his jacket, and Helena expressed her happiness that he was okay, but he apologized for canceling their vacation. Helena reassured him it was fine. After Gigist left, Hoffman told Helena that he understood her concern for Gigist, having gone back to work right after collapsing, but she assured him that Gigist returning to work was better than them going on vacation to Japan where Adam died. On the other hand, Adolf was in the interrogation room, and the investigators were questioning him about his car explosion, assuring him that it was intentional. They suggested that someone might have a grudge against him, and that the explosion could be an assassination attempt. However, Adolf asked the investigators to stop asking him those questions, insisting he had no idea about it. Meanwhile, two detectives were observing the investigation from behind glass. One told the other that the autopsy report confirmed the presence of Ms. 390 parts among the wreckage of Adolf's car. The other responded in shock, saying it was an integrated missile launcher designed as an inhumane weapon, questioning Adolf's profession and whether he was a dealer in illegal weapons. The first replied that Adolf worked in import and export but found his brother's identity suspicious. During the interrogation, the detective asked Adolf a question about his brother, but before he could finish, Adolf exploded in anger, asking the detective if he didn't know the Bloomberg civil rights law, stating that the same crimes committed by suspects can't be directed at their relatives during any interrogation. He told the detective that this question was illegal. At that moment, the detective monitoring the situation ordered that Adolf be kept under surveillance, since the case involved a lethal weapon of the Ms. 390 type, instructing that it remain confidential from the prosecutors and others involved. The interrogation ended, and Adolf returned to his office, receiving a message from his wife at 8:32, asking him to at least call her, assuring him she knew he was busy and thus hadn't returned home the night before. He then received a recorded message at 12:13 p.m. from an anonymous caller warning him that an anti-robot organization was targeting him and that the leader had ordered his elimination, emphasizing that he was in danger. Here, Adolf connected the explosion incident with the leader's desire to get rid of him. The leader then appeared and told Adolf he had heard he was a target. The leader informed him that it wasn't safe for him outside and that he should always stay in his office. Thereupon, Adolf dashed around the office like a madman, saying they might have placed a bomb in there too. Then he completely left the office, continuing to run in panic until Gigist caught up with him, informing him he was from Europol and had been assigned to protect him. Later, Adolf's son Hans spoke to Gigist, asking what happened to the evil story man and if he had been arrested. Their conversation was interrupted by Adolf's entrance, and Hans rushed to him, telling him that investigator Gigist was indeed a super robot and also nice. He became one of his biggest fans. Gigist greeted Adolf with a good morning, but Adolf told him they were leaving. In the car, Adolf asked Gigist to stop training his son on superhero robots. Gigist assured him he had no intention of that. Adolf curiously asked how a world-class robot like him was assigned to protect him, to which Gigist replied he was just following orders. Adolf questioned whether that was at the expense of his vacation. Gigist skeptically asked how he had learned about the trip. Adolf nervously said he heard it from his boss. Gigist then asked if he hated robots and apologized for having to submit to protection from one like him. Once they arrived at the company, Gigist began inspecting Adolf's office for explosives. He declared the place completely safe after checking everything, telling Adolf he would wait in the adjacent room and that he only had to inform him if he felt anything unusual. However, Adolf continued to blame himself, wishing he had enough tools to destroy Gigist. He approached Gigist and confronted him, stating that he knew the police had assigned him to investigate him, not to protect him. Gigist tried to speak, but Adolf interrupted him, stating that the police believed his car exploded because he had done something suspicious. Adolf then asked Gigist to start investigating him as much as he wanted, but on the condition that he would leave after finishing his investigations. Gigist sat down at Adolf's computer and began checking it. He discovered that Adolf was involved in importing and exporting computer parts and systems. Gigist noticed that Adolf had gone to Persia during the Central Asian War. Adolf explained that reconstruction efforts after the war provided job opportunities, with many companies taking similar steps. Most companies cannot succeed by taking on top-secret projects like this. Then Adolf proudly claimed that his company had excessive trust due to its solid track record. He turned on the TV, and at that moment, a news report broke about the discovery of the body of renowned robotics expert Ronald Newton Howard, found early this morning in the suburbs of Australia. Dr. Howard was famous for his discovery of photon energy, and the murder weapon was placed above the body in the shape of horns. Adolf then sarcastically told Gigist that wasn't Dr. Howard the very creator of the robot Epsilon. Gigist asked if he should leave to console his friend Epsilon since the world he created had been killed. Gigist informed him he was on a mission now, to which Adolf asked if he wasn't the same investigator who handled previous cases of a similar nature, revealing that the killer was the same perpetrator behind past crimes. Gigist remarked that there were several recent copycat crimes, and there was no conclusive evidence that the killer was the same as the one behind all the crimes. Adolf told him he would show him something interesting on the computer and asked if he knew of Karatiba prison. Gigist replied that it was a prison in the Persian kingdom kingdom run by the United Thracian States. Adolf explained that this prison had contracted his company to install all its systems, but the company's team noticed someone had tried to erase solitary confinement records. When they attempted to maintain the surveillance systems, the malfunction was serious enough that they had to replace the hard drive, during which an important recording from a prisoner was discovered. Adolf played the recording for Gygest, but it initially sounded unclear. Gygest moved Adolf away from the computer, trying to clarify the muddled recording while Adolf kept insisting that the prisoner was repeatedly mentioning names of members from the Bora Investigative Committee, as if he were casting a curse of death. Gygest then asked Adolf if he realized what kind of prison Karatiba was, and Adolf informed him that it was a prison for holding war criminals. Gygest corrected him, stating it was for holding the most dangerous war criminals, but suddenly Gygest's eyes widened when he succeeded in clarifying the video image, and he suddenly stood up, grabbing Adolf by the collar and asking why he was keeping such important information to himself, explaining that the person they were looking at wasn't an ordinary prisoner, but the supreme leader of the former Persian kingdom, Darius XIV. At that exact moment, Gygest heard Darius repeat Professor Hoffman's name, prompting Gygest to say that Hoffman was in danger. Meanwhile, Epsilon had arrived at Professor Hoffman's lab, taking him without any preamble and flying him through the air. During their flight, Hoffman was shocked to see his lab had been blown up, and Epsilon informed him that he was targeted, so he needed to get him out of there. Hoffman asked if he wasn't supposed to be a peaceful robot, to which Epsilon replied that his creator was killed, and he was about to lose control. At the same time, Gygest was trying to contact Hoffman but couldn't reach him. Adolf suggested he go to him himself. Gygest expressed more concern about the data he possessed, clarifying that Darius was likely involved in this matter, and perhaps it was related to an assassination attempt on him as well. Suddenly, a heat grenade was thrown at Adolf's desk, but Gygest noticed it and caught it in his hands before it exploded, ordering Adolf to get down. After Gygest disabled the bomb, Adolf exclaimed in horror that he had seen such a thing before during the Asia War, noting that those grenades would instantly incinerate people. Gygest then asked who exactly was responsible for this, and Adolf ran towards Gygest, saying he would tell him everything, but he needed protection for himself and his family. Adolf then confessed that he was a member of an anti-robot organization, but the leader wanted him gone because they thought he was a traitor. Adolf dropped to his knees, stating his organization was responsible for the murder of the Berlin robot judge, who had been killed some time ago. Gygest calmed him down, assuring him he would make the necessary arrangements to place him and his family in the witness protection program. On the other side, the organization's leader was informed that Gygest was protecting Adolf, and he found it laughable. His associate told him it was only a matter of time before Adolf confessed everything about the organization, and the leader handed his associate the same weapon Adolf had and ordered him to use it to kill him, saying, "Death to robots and traitors." Meanwhile, Gygest was driving Adolf in his car to a secret hideout. Adolf asked Gygest about his wife and son. Gygest reassured him that they were safe and would soon join him. Elsewhere, Hercules was somewhere giving water to Professor Hoffman, while Epsilon was saying he had to bring the professor here to protect him. Hercules replied that he would leave the professor with him to avoid fighting, then continued saying it was no problem, as he needed bait to lure the enemy into the open, but he couldn't rely on someone who keeps running away, even after his creator was killed. Epsilon then asked Hoffman about the secret conference he held with 2 other scientists in Kimberly 7 years ago, during which he met Professor Howard. Hoffman recalled how eager he was to meet Professor Howard, the inventor of photon energy. The conference also included a third scientist named Tenma, who was the inventor of the electronic brain. Epsilon asked him the purpose of the conference, and Hoffman replied that it was for the 3 of them to share their research together to create a more advanced robot capable of ending wars and saving the planet. Hoffman continued, saying that he and Dr. Howard presented their research, while Dr. Tenma never revealed his research to them, only telling them that the optimal electronic brain would be capable of experiencing suffering, hatred, and mistakes. Hercules then asked Hoffman if Dr. Tenma had stolen their research and escaped. Hoffman replied that Tenma understood their research in a moment, even though it was not simple research, but rather Tenma was a genius with a perfect brain. He then remembered Tenma's last warning during the conference, cautioning Hoffman and Howard against trying to bring robots and humans closer together, insisting that this would generate something horrible. Epsilon questioned where Dr. Tenma, the creator of Atom, was now. Meanwhile, Okonomizu requested to connect with Dr. Tenma, recalling their first meeting when he apologized for becoming his successor in the Ministry of Science, expressing regret at seeing the creator of the optimal electronic brain leaving the ministry. Tenma told him that electronic brains were not made, as they grew from emotions, but under Article 13 of the Robot Rights Protection Law, robots were equipped with a control device to suppress their emotions, hindering the growth of their electronic brains. Okonomizu remarked that despite that, he had managed to create a masterpiece like Atom. Tenma responded that Atom was a failed invention. Meanwhile, Okonomizu was informed that contacting Tenma was not possible as his line had been lost. Hoffman was telling Hercules and Epsilon that Tenma had disappeared from the scene and had totally faded away. When they held the Kimberly conference, they were surprised by Dr. Tenma's appearance, but he had been missing since then. Epsilon asked if it was possible that Tenma had only appeared at the conference to warn them against trying to make robots closer to humans. While Hercules questioned if Hoffman thought Tenma had created a perfect robot, Hoffman replied, "Maybe." On the other side, investigator Lyman contacted Gygest, informing him that he had received a signal from Hercules confirming that Hoffman was safe. He asked how the analysis of the video data taken from Adolf was progressing. Adolf requested Gygest to let him listen to what was being said as well. Lyman confirmed that the footage indeed belonged to Darius, and the words he was repeating were those of the Bora Investigative Committee members, but they weren't sure that it was an actual order for murder. Lyman continued, explaining that the Persian kingdom had fallen prey to war after the withdrawal of the Bora Investigation Committee, which might have made Darius resentful towards the committee. Gygest recalled that the committee hadn't found the mass destruction robots, and Lyman informed him there was confidential information, indicating the existence of a special chip for creating a highly advanced electronic brain acquired during the Bora Committee's investigation in the Persian kingdom, and this chip was named Tenma. Lyman then addressed Adolf, stating that the investigation into the anti-robot organization was still ongoing, but there might be other parties targeting him due to the information he had. Adolf inquired about his family, and Lyman reassured him that they were safe and under their care. Gygest then stopped for a break during the drive, and Adolf rushed to the bathroom. When Gygest checked the bathroom, he discovered there was a multitask cleaning robot inside. Later, the robot knocked on Adolf's door, ordering him to kill Gygest if he wanted to save his family. Adolf reacted violently to the robot and destroyed it. At that moment, Gygest rushed inside and ordered Adolf to stop destroying the robot, lifting him up in anger. Adolf then asked if he had killed his brother with the same expressions, while Ochanomizu was recalling his conversation with Tenma about electronic brains, where Tenma informed him that a brain capable of hatred and murder would give birth to the greatest robot on the planet. Gygest drove his car at top speed, haunted by memories of Adolf's brother. Meanwhile, Adolf kept reminding him that he was nothing but a killing machine. When Gygest finally arrived at the secret hideout, Adolf mocked it, calling it just a wooden shack. Gygest reassured him that the inside was equipped with the latest security systems. He then got back in his car, stating he would return in an hour, and ordered Adolf to stay inside the house no matter what happened, assuring him that his wife and son would join him soon. Adolf reminded Gygest that his duty was to protect him, but Gygest didn't listen and activated his flying system, rising into the sky. As he hovered above, Adolf recalled the cleaning robot's words, urging him to kill Gygest, telling him he would find a weapon under the pine tree, 200 steps north of the hideout. Soon after, Adolf's family arrived, with his son running to hug him and asking about Gygest, while his wife, Elsa, questioned him about what was happening. Adolf apologized for worrying her, but she pressed him again about what he had done. Meanwhile, Gygest was visiting Brau again. Brau asked him how he was feeling now, while Hans was having fun in the shack, claiming the basement felt like a shelter from nuclear bombs and even included a gym. Elsa continued to interrogate Adolf, who revealed the complete truth. Elsa told him that Gygest might have actually killed someone, but they were ultimately talking about his brother. She regretfully stated that his brother deserved to die for committing countless crimes, leaving her shivering at the thought. Adolf told her that even so, his brother didn't deserve to be killed by a robot. Elsa insisted that Gygest was just following orders because that was his duty, and she assured him that Gygest hadn't killed his brother out of hatred. Meanwhile, Brau told Gygest that he had known from the first moment that he killed Adolf's brother out of hatred. He confirmed that he realized it when he first saw him, recognizing the resemblance immediately. Brau continued, saying that memory would never be erased from his mind, no matter how hard its creators tried, as the scar would always remain. Gygest remembered jumbled memories of Adolf's brother begging for mercy, pleading not to be killed, but at that moment, Gygest hadn't listened. He had drawn his deadly weapon and aimed it at Adolf's brother without hesitation. At that moment, Brau asked Gygest to satisfy his desire so he could clearly remember real hatred. Meanwhile, an announcement was made about the appearance of WBB Kiar, the battle Hercules. The scene shifted to several robots fighting each other with deadly weapons, exchanging fire during the battle. It was said that Hercules would face a strong opponent this time, as dominance belonged to the stronger, until someone even stronger defeated him. On the other side, a police armored vehicle arrived to take Professor Hoffman. As Hoffman boarded the vehicle, he turned to Hercules and Epsilon, stating that Gygest was investigating the current case, and urged them not to act rashly but to help Gygest find a solution. Hercules reassured him that they would do that. After the armored vehicle departed with Hoffman, Epsilon sensed an unusual electromagnetic energy and informed Hercules of it, asking if he needed assistance. Hercules refused, stating he wasn't authorized to help. Epsilon mentioned that he wasn't prepared for battle at all, but Hercules told him that unlike him, he was entirely prepared for it, as he was built as a battle machine. Hercules urged Epsilon to leave quickly, saying a robot without combat capabilities would only hinder him. Epsilon told Hercules that he was once again belittled, just like when he refused to fight in the war. Hercules replied that perhaps Epsilon was right to refuse combat. Despite being made for battle, that war was not fighting. Hercules mentioned a robot from the Air Battalion who fought alongside him in the war, aiding in the success of many missions, but he later noticed that this robot kept washing his hands repeatedly. When Hercules asked what he was doing, the robot replied that he couldn't remove something. Bringing himself back to the present, Hercules told Epsilon they were fighting a ghost. The enemy was a ghost, and he commanded Epsilon to leave immediately. Epsilon questioned why Adam was killed despite committing no sin. Hercules fell silent as Epsilon continued to ask what he knew, claiming he knew something about the war. Suddenly, a storm broke out, and Epsilon told Hercules he would wait for him at an altitude of 3,000 kilometers. Hercules turned even said he could gather combat data from that height, assuring him that he fought better with an audience. Even if that audience was just one person, because after all, he was Hercules. Later, Hercules grabbed a Brando memory chip and told it they had fought many battles that would enter history, without deciding a clear winner. He wished they could have settled things back then. Putting on his combat suit, Hercules said he would settle his accounts with this thing before charging towards the tornado that erupted from the void in the sea. He entered the whirlwind, grabbing hold of something, while Epsilon observed the battle from above, noting a circular gap swirling rapidly within the tornado. Meanwhile, the 99th military trial convened, where Judge Darius the 14th ordered an oath to be taken immediately. Darius told him that God did not believe in oaths. The judge repeated his order for him to swear. Darius replied that humans lie, which is why God doesn't believe them. He continued, stating that humanity needed to be replaced by a new species, which would be robots. The judge ruled to dismiss the session and remove Darius from the courtroom. At that moment, the audience erupted, accusing Darius of murder, saying he was responsible for the massacre. Darius responded that the massacre was a stage of evolution, which only fueled the viewers' anger more, demanding Darius be punished with death. Amid the chaos, one person shouted that he was from the Human Rights Organization and offered to help Darius, who asked him for coloring pencils. Meanwhile, Epsilon was anxiously awaiting the outcome of Hercules' battle against the enemy, when suddenly robot parts flew into the air. He wondered if those parts belonged to Hercules. Confused, Epsilon realized those pieces mixed with the enemy's parts and questioned whether Hercules had defeated the enemy or been defeated himself. Looking down at the land, he saw the body Hercules used in his daily life, falling into the water, and speculated about what was happening, certain that robot parts were spreading all over the sea, but he couldn't track anything due to the flow of electromagnetic waves. Meanwhile, Hercules continued to fight, gripping the enemy's horns with determination to break them. Epsilon thought that if he helped Hercules now, they could get rid of the enemy. But before Epsilon could move to assist Hercules, he began to lose control of his body. Confused memories attacked him, while at the same time, the enemy managed to subdue Hercules, binding him with his tail and lifting him up. In the prison, the two guards were telling Darius that he had exceeded the time limit for shutting off the electricity, but Darius ignored them and continued to paint on the wall. Then the guards opened the cell and found Darius saying that the only survivor would be Pluto, while Epsilon witnessed Hercules' death. He immediately fled, saying he needed to inform Gigesht about Hercules' death, as he was the only one with the authority to arrest the enemy. However, when he tried to contact Gigesht, he failed, as Gigesht was driving at that moment, recalling Adolf's accusations that he had killed his brother. Later, the investigator asked Gigesht to look into a new case, as androids had been brought in to identify their son's corpse. The android told his wife that humans cry in such situations and mentioned that they had applied to adopt a child as soon as the project for adopting android kids had launched. The android expressed joy over adopting this little android. Following this, Gigesht introduced himself to the investigators, stating that he was now involved in the investigation regarding this case. One of the investigators mentioned that involving an android might be a bad idea, explaining that android kids were being kidnapped and torn apart, possibly by someone against androids. Gigesht responded that he would follow the orders and investigate all possibilities behind the kidnapping of android children. The investigator continued, saying that the perpetrator kidnapped android children every time after destroying the surveillance system. The total number of kidnappings had reached 23. At that moment, one of the investigators was informed that they had installed Become cameras at 304 locations, but at the same time, the investigator was told that all the android haters and those against them had been spotted in other areas during the incident, indicating that all suspects had present alibis. Later, news broke in the media that investigator Gigesht had joined the case. Gigesht chastised his boss, Baker, questioning why he had informed the media about it. Baker explained that this was a misleading tactic, as it would show people Gigesht's commitment to solving the case and would prevent him from being implicated in the next crime. Later, investigator Henry explained to Gigesht that they had narrowed the list of android haters down to 7 people who had not been spotted by surveillance cameras. They were in the European Union at the time of the crime and were now all under surveillance. Gigesht asked Henry if he could compare the failure rates of the Become 3 systems before and after the incidents. Henry replied that the manufacturing company possessed that data. He continued, stating that the system itself was top-notch, yet it was still prone to failure, with a failure rate of 3.26% over the past 3 years. After the events, the failure rate was 3.25%, even though the crimes occurred after the suspect had destroyed the system. At the same time, a kidnapping victim was reported in Sector W25, where the victim was an android child. Gigesht received an order from Baker to head straight to the crime scene, so he called Helena, apologizing for having an emergency. However, Helena told him something that made him return to investigator Henry immediately, asking him to find the reasons for the Become 3 failures, as he could not access the case data. Henry noticed that Gigesht did not seem like himself, but Gigesht insisted he just needed Henry to follow his commands. Shortly, Henry displayed all the reasons for the Become 3 system failures within the past 3 months, noting 3 outages due to lightning and 38 control chip issues. Gigesht asked Henry to compare that data with the previous 3 years' data. Henry informed him that the rate was almost steady. Gigesht realized that the perpetrator had not destroyed the systems. Henry mentioned that there had been one case yesterday indicating a human had destroyed the system, but no kidnappings had taken place that day. night. He then requested Henry to show him the list of maintenance contractors in the vicinity of the kidnappings. Once Gigesh saw the list, he stated that the kidnappings began with the repair of the system, not due to its failure. Henry noted that there was only one person responsible for the system's repair. He then displayed a picture of that person to Gigesh, who quickly rushed outside, ignoring Henry's calls. Meanwhile, Adolf was searching near a tree for the weapon that the cleaning android had mentioned. He was then confronted by Meyer, a member of Europol, who asked what he was doing. Adolf inquired if Meyer was looking for it to return it to the hideout. Meyer explained that when he stopped for a break near the forest while on his way to the hideout, the camera footage caught a suspicious man following him. Upon investigating this suspicious person, it turned out he was a member of the anti-android organization. Meyer continued, saying that the organization was aware of his movements, so he needed to be moved to another location. Suddenly, Gigesh returned and reprimanded Meyer for leaving his post without permission. He told Meyer he would file a report on him, but the priority now was to protect Mr. Adolf. Gigesh informed Meyer that he was aware of the situation and would relocate Adolf immediately. Adolf then asked Gigesh if he was abandoning his mission, insisting that what he did to his brother was not part of his duties. Gigesh replied that his current mission was to protect him. Later, Gigesh moved Adolf and his family in his car. Hans asked from which direction the bad guys would come. Gigesh assured him that the investigator's car behind them was guarding them, telling him not to worry. Hans then asked if Gigesh's arm would turn into a gun if the bad guys showed up, mentioning that they had told him at school that androids couldn't shoot people. Adolf interjected that if it came to that, Gigesh would definitely shoot. Suddenly, Gigesh noticed the investigator's car had disappeared and lost contact with him as well. Elsa asked him if they were being chased. Gigesh ordered everyone to fasten their seatbelts, stating he would speed up. He began driving as fast as he could, commenting on how the police car had vanished in an instant and that the weapon used could be. Adolf completed the thought, saying it was an integrated cluster weapon, the same model he had. Then Adolf begged Gigesh to help him, or at least help his son and wife. He informed Gigesh of what the android had told him during the break, continuing that the organization had planned from the outset to kill them both to keep their truth hidden. Adolf admitted to Gigesh that he hated him for killing his brother, saying he certainly understood the feeling of hatred. Otherwise, he wouldn't have killed his brother that way, but he shouldn't involve his family in this situation, as it was between them. Gigesh ordered him to grab the lever on his right. Suddenly, the pursuer fired a projectile at Gigesh's car. Gigesh was propelled upwards while holding Elsa and Hans in his arms, while Adolf fell safely to the ground thanks to the lever. The pursuer then exited the armored vehicle, aiming the projectile at Adolf, claiming that a regular gun was enough to kill him. However, the commander had instructed him to make it seem like he died in an explosion caused by the cluster cannon. In that moment, Gigesh appeared and aimed his weapon at the pursuer. The pursuer questioned if it wasn't forbidden to shoot with his right hand and reminded him that it was not allowed for him to kill a human. Gigesh then ordered Adolf to approach him slowly and stand behind him. The pursuer said that his cannon could reduce them to ashes, even if there was an android made from zirconium. At the moment the pursuer fired his projectile, Gigesh also shot a projectile from his gun, resulting in something akin to an explosion. The pursuer stood dumbfounded at the shock of the situation. Gigesh informed him that his left arm was releasing a tranquilizing gas and asked him to surrender quietly, or else he would lose consciousness from the gas. Later, Gigesh was taken for maintenance. At that point, Adolf told him that his brother was one of the worst criminals and that he had tried to kill him to avenge his brother. Yet he, in turn, used his body as a shield to protect him. Gigesh replied that this was his duty. Gigesh then asked Adolf whether the feeling of hatred disappears in humans or if it continues no matter how hard they try to erase it. Adolf was silent, prompting Gigesh to share that what he feared most after learning to hate was himself. Meanwhile, one of the girls was observing Uran from a window in the school building, saying to two others that Uran used to be very cheerful, but since that incident, she always seeks to be alone, proving how much she has developed as a mechanism. Just then, the principal interrupted, stating that androids feel sadness and shed tears just like humans. An android named Sakamoto agreed, saying even an old android like him could feel sorrow. The principal then pondered what they could do to bring Uran out of her sadness. He said she was not alone in her grief over Adam. Suddenly, Uran stood up, claiming to feel a deeper sadness coming from somewhere. She then ran off to another part of the garden and found a small kitten. She picked it up and wondered if it was the one feeling sad and where its mother was. But the kitten was not the source of the sadness, so Uran continued on. Then she approached a child who had his back turned to her and asked if he was feeling sad. He told her to leave him alone. Uran explained that jumping from there would not help. The child turned to face her, revealing a face covered in bruises, and asked her what he was supposed to do as he was bullied every day and threatened for money. The child then knelt in front of her, saying that death would be better for him. Uran stated that she could not understand the desire for death because she was an android. The child retorted, questioning how an android could understand such a feeling, and told her to leave him alone. Uran then expressed that she was very sad because her brother was killed, but would she have wished for death if she were human like him? She then looked at the kitten she was holding and said it too was sad, but all it thought about now was the milk that would satisfy its hunger. The child asked if that kitten would be abandoned, prompting Uran to approach him and place the kitten in his hands. The child mentioned that the kitten was shaking from hunger and they needed to feed it, but Uran ran off, asking the child to bring milk for the kitten, as she felt there was someone even sadder just steps away. As Uran made her way to the sad person, she tripped over a wallet, picked it up, and continued her journey. She found an old man in the middle of the road and asked if he was looking for his wallet. He took the wallet from her, saying he had put his pension card in it to buy a gift for his grandson, thanking her before she continued searching for the sad person. Eventually, she arrived at a cemetery and saw a bouquet of flowers placed on a grave. Yuran remarked that the person she felt such tremendous sadness from had just been here and seemed to have felt the death of the same person twice. She read the name on the gravestone, Tobio Tenma. Meanwhile, at the Ministry of Science, the secretary informed Minister Okanamizu that the Prime Minister had called several times. Okanamizu yelled for her to tell everyone that he did not want to discuss holding an official funeral for Adam, insisting that he had not given up yet. He asked her if she hadn't received a reply from the former minister yet. At the same time, he heard Okanamizu from security preventing someone from entering, saying that the man needed to make an appointment first. Otherwise, security wouldn't be able to identify him. The man then informed them that there would be no issue with the security system because he was the former head of the Ministry of Science. Okanamizu ran toward the man, calling him Dr. Tenma and telling him he had been waiting for him because he was the only one capable of saving Adam in this condition, considering he was the one who created him. Tenma firmly replied that Adam couldn't be saved because Adam was dead. He had only come to bid farewell. Tenma then stood before Adam's body, which was connected to machines in a room, and he recalled Tobio, who resembled Adam, as they had shared meals together. At that time, Tobio told him he had studied in the morning and cleaned his room in the afternoon. Tobio continued, saying he found an encyclopedia of insects in his library that fascinated him so much that he forgot to finish cleaning, as he became engrossed in reading about the beautiful butterfly Zephyros featured in the encyclopedia. Tobio wished to see one of those butterflies alive. Tenma asked him what he thought of the food he was eating, and Tobio responded that it was delicious. Outside Adam's room, one of the researchers ran toward Okanamizu and informed him that Dr. Tenma was trying to revive Adam. Okanamizu hurried with the researcher to the data monitoring room, while the researcher told him that what he saw was unbelievable. There, Okanamizu saw Dr. Tenma working to revive Adam and update his data. One of the other researchers wondered if they were witnessing a true genius in action. Okanamizu said he knew Tenma would do this, even though he had said he was there to say goodbye to Adam. Later, Okanamizu brought a cup of tea to Tenma, telling him he needed to rest after working for 18 straight hours. Tenma then told Okanamizu that he noticed he had also made remarkable repairs to Adam, finding no abnormalities in his artificial fortress or in either of his right or left hemispheres. He then stated that he had checked the modifications to the receptors and the gaps in the neural overlaps, and everything was correct. Okanamizu asked why Adam wasn't waking up then. Following this, Okanamizu mentioned that they were dealing with a case involving the destruction of the most advanced automata in the world, alongside the killing of former members of the Bora Investigation Committee. Suddenly, Okanamizu stood up and asked Tenma about Dr. Guji, saying he was the doctor who built the automata army for the Persian kingdom. Tenma told him that he didn't know him, clarifying that the artificial intelligence he developed should not be used for something like building an army, as the automata possessing his AI were far nobler and more complete than being used for war. Tenma then confessed that he created a perfect automaton at someone's request, even though he had told that person it would be costly. He continued, saying that the most advanced artificial intelligence in the world, including Adam, had very complex programming, but was limited. To overcome this, he analyzed and programmed 9.9 billion personalities, the same number as the world's population, testing all of this on the perfect automaton. Then, Tenma shocked Okanamizu by revealing that that automaton ultimately refused to wake up. While it was a complex situation, he succeeded in waking it by instilling unbalanced emotions in it, such as love, anger, and hatred. Okanamizu asked where that automaton was, to which Tenma replied that its owner must have hidden it and it was still asleep. Okanamizu then asked if Adam had the same situation or if he felt something unimaginable that mimicked a response to that. Okanamizu questioned whether Adam wouldn't wake up for the same reason that prevented his perfect automaton from waking. He suggested that if they gave Adam unbalanced emotions, a completely different Adam might be born. Tenma warned that Adam might return as a monster. He then recalled a moment when he was sitting with Tobio, saying that the real Tobio had died in a car accident and that he never liked cleaning his room. Tobio had told him he wouldn't clean his room much starting tomorrow. Tenma noted that his son Tobio always hated studying. When Tobio said he wouldn't study then, Tenma continued explaining that Tobio put the encyclopedia he had bought for him on the top shelf of the library and never looked at it. He then asked if Tobio loved him, to which Tobio said he did. Tenma admitted he had been harsh on his son and always scolded him. That's why he was confident Tobio hated him. Meanwhile, Gijis returned to work, and Hoffman tried to reach him, warning him against going back to work while he was still in the middle of a repair, as shrapnel from the cluster bomb was still inside his body. Gijis, however, was flying in his vehicle at that moment, in a place that resembled a desert. Then Epsilon contacted him, saying he urgently needed his help. At that time, Gijis arrived at Darius's prison, and after verifying his identity, they let him in. He was met by Colonel Armstrong from the Thracian army, who was informed by Gijis of who he was. The colonel explained that his force had not joined the International Criminal Law Treaty, facility, and that Gijish's request was approved based on a special order from the president. He then told Gijish that time was limited, so he needed to wrap things up quickly. The colonel indicated that their automata were outdated, even though the prison facility was very modern, but they were behind in automata manufacturing. However, if they had advanced automatons like Gijish, the Persian kingdom could be restored quickly. Later, a method of communication with the prisoner Darius was established, but Gijish initially refused the electronic communication, wanting to meet the prisoner in person. Nevertheless, he continued the interrogation and asked Darius about the treatment in prison. Darius replied that it was not bad. Gijish objected to the communication method, stating that he would meet the prisoner personally. The colonel warned him that this would be considered a violation of international laws. Gijish responded that he did not care about their relationship with Europol because the world was currently in danger. He was indeed allowed to meet Darius, who told him that he seemed just like humans. Gijish asked if he was the mastermind behind the series of crimes involving the destruction of advanced automata and if he ordered the assassination of Bora Investigation Committee members. Darius claimed that the Bora Investigation Committee members were liars who turned his country into a barren desert and stripped away their civilization due to their cursed machines and artificial intelligence. Gijish asked if that was why he had created a monster out of revenge. Darius replied that he hadn't created it. It was born, and it was the strongest and purest of the automatons. Gijish incredulously repeated, "Born?" Darius explained that it was an automaton reborn in a tougher, stronger body. Then he pointed to a painting of flowers on the wall and said, "This is Pluto." Gijish attacked him, asking who Pluto was. Darius told him he was sure he knew. Darius then bit his tongue in an attempt to commit suicide, prompting Gijish to call for help immediately. Gijish then exited the prison and informed his superior of what had happened. Suddenly, Epsilon fell in front of him, handing him something belonging to Heracles. He informed Gijish that during Heracles' killing, massive electromagnetic waves were released, and his analysis showed those waves indicated hatred. However, he managed to spot an image of someone, and when Epsilon transferred the image to Gijish, he exclaimed that it couldn't possibly be Pluto. Later, Gijish wandered through the market, where vendors displayed their goods. Meanwhile, Gijish's boss was in contact with him, ordering him to return immediately, while they would handle Darius's attempted suicide because the Thracian states were strict. Gijish said to himself that he was tired of his boss's methods. Baker continued, expressing concern for Gijish's physical condition, noting that Professor Hoffman feared that his Zeronium power had weakened due to the cannon blast. Gijish thanked his boss for his concern, assuring him he was about to solve the case. The boss asked if Gijish had any idea who was behind everything, to which he replied that he had something they call intuition. The boss questioned how an automaton could possess a sense of intuition. As Gijish continued on his way, he was surprised to see a flower vendor automaton stumble and fall to the ground. He helped the automaton up, who thanked him, mentioning that its balance had been off since it was damaged in the war. Gijish advised it to take care of itself. The automaton then offered to sell him flowers, assuring him that it accepted credit cards, but Gijish said he didn't have time. Later, Gijish met Abdullah at a cafe, who introduced himself as the Minister of Science in the Persian Republic. After a handshake, Gijish ordered coffee, and Abdullah urged him to relax, saying he was a scientist. Abdullah then steered the conversation to how he lost most of his body in the last war. Gijish apologized, but Abdullah thanked him for meeting, expressing a desire to show him how the country was rising from the rubble after the war, as markets began to open their doors again. Abdullah then noticed the flower vendor automaton watching Gijish from a distance and asked if that automaton was his friend. Gijish replied that he had just met it. Abdullah continued, saying their country's economy was starting to improve, yet their children were still marginalized in society. He then asked Gijish why he was there. Gijish directly inquired about his connection to Darius XIV, to which Abdullah confessed they had been on good terms. Darius had often talked about turning the desert into a land of green fields. Gijish asked if he meant flower fields and then inquired about Guji. Abdullah confirmed that it was indeed about the flower fields, but denied knowledge of Guji. Gijish insisted this was impossible because he had heard of a brilliant scientist named Guji who enabled the construction of an advanced robotic army during Darius's reign. Abdullah mentioned that Guji's name appeared in the Bora investigation report, but that this person's existence had not been proven, which suggested that what was said about Guji was just a rumor. Gijish then asked about the artificial intelligence model of Tenma that was recovered. Abdullah explained that Dr. Tenma and the brilliant scientist he mentioned created absolute artificial intelligence, so advanced that the automaton never woke up. There were rumors suggesting the automaton still slept in Darius's palace. Abdullah encouraged Gijish to check it out for himself, but made an excuse about not having enough time and asked to leave. Before he did, Gijish showed him a photo of a man in a flower field, the same one he took from Epsilon, and asked about its owner. Abdullah said he didn't know him. Gijish thanked him for his cooperation and apologized for first being confused about whether he was an automaton or a human. Abdullah replied, "No problem." Gijish mentioned that he had once experienced the same confusion when meeting Adam. Abdullah responded that Adam was a very advanced automaton. Gijish agreed, but then mentioned to Abdullah that his device had just identified him as a human, especially after showing him the photo of the man in the flower field, and he lied by saying he hadn't seen him before. Automata cannot lie. Then Abdullah left the cafe without further explanation. Gijish stepped out after him and found the flower vendor automaton still waiting, urging him to buy flowers. Gijish informed him that his boss would be angry if he continued chasing customers like this. Gijish continued walking until he suddenly stopped when he heard a talisman vendor promoting a talisman of Guji, the Sage of the Sands. He echoed the name Guji. The talisman seller informed him that Guji was a legendary sage who had turned to sand again after revealing the truth of life to the ancient Uzbek king. Jijish contemplated the talisman, recalling Abdullah's words about the automaton that hadn't awakened. The flower vendor then approached from behind. Jijish took a flower from him and asked for his name. The vendor replied that his name was Muhammad Ali and that he wanted to become a scientist. Jijish encouraged him to pursue his dream by studying hard. The flower vendor asked if he thought he could become like Saad. Jijish was puzzled, repeating, "Saad?" The flower vendor clarified that he was the person whose picture he showed earlier. Jijish presented the photo again and asked if this was the person he meant. The flower vendor confirmed that this was Saad, who studied in Holland to turn the land into fields of flowers and was his hero. Jijish reassured him that he could definitely become like Saad and advised him not to lose hope. Jijish then began investigating Saad, eventually reaching the house Saad rented. The landlord informed him that Saad lived in a room on the third floor and revealed that he had planted all the flowers lining the windows in the building. Jijish commented that they were beautiful, and the landlord mentioned that Saad had studied botany and that all the plants he had planted were still growing even after many years. She confirmed that she once asked Saad if he knew of any plants that bloom all year without wilting. He replied that flowers must wilt after producing seeds. Jijish asked for a picture of Saad. The landlord assured him she definitely had a photo of him, but it was on her old computer and requested he come back later, promising to search her old computer in the storeroom. She then asked if Saad had done something bad, as someone from Europol was investigating him. Jijish replied no. The landlord added that Saad was really polite, to the point that no one would realize he was an automaton. Later, Jijish proceeded to investigate Saad at his school. His teacher told him Saad had been an excellent and passionate student, but his love for his country exceeded everything else. He dedicated himself to filling the Persian kingdom's desert with flowers. The professor continued, saying that Saad's research was very advanced. One day, Saad told him that Gur had grown strong, and at another time mentioned that Janus was ill. He later informed him that Ishtar had improved. The professor remarked that these names were all names of tulip flowers, as Saad named every flower in a way that encouraged better growth. The professor apologized to Jijish, assuring him he meant no offense. Although Saad was the most advanced automaton, he sometimes made unscientific and unrealistic statements. The professor then took Jijish to his laboratory and showed him a tulip that Saad had planted, still thriving without wilting. Jijish asked how long it had been growing, to which the professor replied 3 years, stating that Saad had instructed him not to plant it in the ground until he returned. He expressed his intention to study it if Saad didn't come back, then looked at the tulip, saying he felt it was also waiting for Saad. Later, Jijish stopped in front of a flower shop, where the shopkeeper asked the automaton Anton to deliver a bouquet to Mr. Van Dyke's shop. Jijish informed her that Anton was a diligent worker. He then recounted his encounter with a flower vendor in the Persian kingdom, who seemed unhappy with his job. The girl mentioned that this was Saad's country, and informed Jijish that Saad used to frequent her shop, helping her run it after school. He always told her he wanted to fill his country with flowers, but suddenly one day, he said he would return to his homeland and enlist in the army. The girl sadly continued that she tried to stop Saad back then because someone like him should never become a soldier, no matter how long the war lasted. Saad explained to her that his father died in the war, and that he too might face the same fate. Jijish then asked her about the name of the tulip that still bloomed, knowing that Saad had named every flower. The girl explained that Saad performed numerous experiments at a research site in Zandem to develop a flower that could withstand the desert's conditions. He wanted a lot of that flower, but one day he went to check on his flowers and found that only one was thriving while all the surrounding flowers had wilted. She believed that flower was named Pluto. Later, Jijish returned to the landlord, who informed him that she had found the computer. Jijish started flipping through pictures of the tenants until he found a photo of Saad. He told her that the picture was cut, and the owner mentioned that Saad had told her he was photographed with his father. Jijius thought for a moment and concluded that since Saad was an automaton, he must resemble his creator, his father. Then Jijius discovered that the second half of the picture belonged to Professor Abdullah, which surprised him. On the other side, a doll sat on a chair in a dimly lit area, stating that Jijius was getting closer to the truth. This confirmed that Gigius' investigative skills were impressive, and that his ability to accomplish tasks was remarkable. Given that Gigius possessed the zirconium weapon, he might be the strongest weapon of mass destruction found so far. This could lead to Pluto's defeat. However, there was a way to kill Gigius. Events unfolded, and Gigius went to meet Brow, who told him he felt jealous because he was trapped in this body and couldn't move. Brow asked Gigius if he knew who was responsible for all these events. Gigius replied, Professor Abdullah. Meanwhile, Epsilon witnessed the funeral of scientist Howard, during which he was startled by Abdullah's voice coming from behind, saying he couldn't believe he met him. Epsilon turned around and Abdullah introduced himself. Epsilon asked if he traveled all the way from the Persian kingdom to attend the funeral. Abdullah said he wished he had met Professor Howard while he was alive, affirming that history would record Howard's achievements in photon energy development. Abdullah went on to say that Professor Howard helped end the dictatorship in the Persian kingdom as a member of the Bora Investigation Committee and contributed to restoring peace. He then turned to Epsilon and told him that Professor Howard left a legacy behind, admitting he was amazed by Howard's level of perfection. Epsilon mentioned he had heard about Howard losing most of his body in the war. Abdullah responded that this loss couldn't compare to losing family. Meanwhile, Brow empathetically noted that Gigius didn't visit just to tell him that Abdullah was responsible for the series of events. Gigius asked, "What will happen when the automaton enjoys absolute artificial intelligence?" Brow replied that the automaton would not awaken since simulating 9.9 billion personalities on Earth is endless. Gigius then asked how to awaken the automaton. Brow suggested providing it with extreme emotions like hatred, anger, and sadness. On the other side, Abdullah told Epsilon that his powers must have weakened with the death of his creator. Epsilon retorted that he didn't need immense strength. Abdullah mentioned he had heard about Epsilon refusing to fight in the war, confirming that he was right because the war was unjust, taking everything from him, his wife, and children. Tears fell from Abdullah's eyes, and the funeral ended. Then Abdullah asked Epsilon about the most important thing in his life, but before Epsilon could answer, his adopted children appeared. Epsilon apologized to them and told them that the funeral was over and they would return home. The children gathered around Epsilon, and Abdullah mentioned he heard he adopted war orphans. He then pleaded with Epsilon to take care of those children for his sake. Abdullah continued, stating that he should attend the European Automata Conference because rebuilding the Persian kingdom required more incredible automata like him. After Abdullah left, the children told Epsilon that Wasley was missing. They began searching for Wasley, who was hiding behind a tree. Once they found him, Epsilon embraced him, assuring him they were no longer in the battlefield, but Wasley kept repeating, Bora. Meanwhile, Brow told Gigius that once the automaton with absolute intelligence regained consciousness, it would lie to others and even to itself. Gigius inquired about Pluto. Brow said he must be at home undergoing maintenance to fix the damage he sustained in his battle against Hercules. Gigius remarked that the Persian kingdom was Sod's home, but Brow corrected him, saying it was Pluto's home, the flower of the tulip. At that moment, Gigius accelerated in his car and called his superior, stating they needed to arrest Abdullah immediately. His superior asked what he intended to do, affirming that Abdullah was a very important person. Gigius informed him he was heading to the agricultural research facility owned by the Persian kingdom in the Netherlands, specifically in Zaandam, on the outskirts of Amsterdam. Meanwhile, researchers praised Professor Hoffman's speech, affirming he deserved all the accolades he received. One of them thanked him for attending the European Automata Conference despite all the difficulties he faced, asking if the security measures arranged for him were satisfactory. Hoffman confirmed that he managed to attend the conference thanks to those measures. Then, two security robots arrived, informing Hoffman that the helicopter was ready and they would secure the area first. One of them remarked that the entire field of mechanical engineering depended on Professor Hoffman. Before Dr. Hoffman boarded the helicopter, he asked his guard about the restroom. The guard informed him he checked it, to which Hoffman replied that he would be fine alone. Dr. Hoffman then went to the restroom, where he encountered Abdullah, who praised his speech, confirming that he was moved by Hoffman's observations regarding the potential contributions of zirconium to peace. Abdullah introduced himself to Professor Hoffman, stating he was from the Persian Republic. Meanwhile, Gigius descended into the basement of the agricultural research facility, where he found an ordinary generator and noticed the electromagnetic waves were weak, similar to what Epsilon recorded during the Hercules battle. Gigius continued walking inside until he was surprised by Abdullah's follower blocking his path. Suddenly, the man opened his mouth and vomited cockroaches that filled the ground. At the conference venue, Abdullah shook hands with Hoffman, saying he was glad to meet him since he was ultimately Gigius's creator. Hoffman asked if Abdullah needed any assistance concerning the Persian kingdom. Abdullah mentioned that zirconium was an ideal mineral and suggested they might consider lifting restrictions on its supply. Abdullah continued, saying that the criminal destroying the most advanced automata could not defeat Gigius, given that he was made from zirconium. Although he had heard recently that Gigius suffered damage from a cluster cannon, Hoffman replied that the information was correct, but the damage inflicted on Gigius was not severe. Abdullah said, "So, Gigius has no weaknesses," to which Hoffman replied that Gigius has multiple layers of advanced control systems built into him. Abdullah then asked what would happen if Gigius made a mistake, like killing someone. Meanwhile, Gigius was firing at one of Abdullah's followers, only to be surprised by multiple copies of that follower. Gigius wondered what was protecting them, while Abdullah continued his conversation with Hoffman, asking about a killer robot from the past named Brow. He noted that it described its crimes as executions, just like humans do when committing murder. Hoffman asked Abdullah what he was trying to say exactly, and Abdullah informed him that the Persian kingdom was executed after he and members of the inquiry committee entered the country. Hoffman fell silent, and then Abdullah apologized, saying that peace also came to the Persian kingdom thanks to him, but that the robot must be executed if it killed a human. Hoffman told him that Gigius wouldn't make such a mistake. Abdullah countered that an advanced robot like Gigius might even commit suicide. Hoffman replied that authorities could erase those memories from Gigius' mind before he thought of that. Suddenly, Hoffman remembered asking his superior, shilling, about what he did with Gijish's memories, while Abdullah mentioned at that moment that he envied robots for their ability to erase their memories. At the same time, Gijish was running through the basement when he received a call from Europol, informing him that Abdullah's location had been identified and that he was in Dusseldorf for a robot conference. Gijish ordered for Abdullah to be arrested immediately, and the caller told him that Professor Hoffman was also at the same conference. Meanwhile, Hoffman had entered an elevator with his robotic guard, who asked him if everything was alright. Suddenly, the robot became irrationally angry, stating that those who caused harm to the Persian kingdom should be executed. In the same spot, Gijish was handling communications to ensure Professor Hoffman's safety. Suddenly, Gijish sensed movement beside him, while in the Dusseldorf building, security was all around. Someone came running and asked Becker to check the elevator camera, where Becker noticed a monster trapping Hoffman inside the elevator, heading toward the helicopter pad on the upper floor. When Becker ordered to pursue that elevator, someone informed him that the rest of the elevators were down. Meanwhile, Hoffman asked the guard if anything else controlled his artificial intelligence. Then he heard Becker's voice through the elevator, urging him to stay calm, but the robot blew up the loudspeaker. Hoffman asked if he was the one who killed the other scientists, to which the robot replied that he had to execute him. Simultaneously, Becker contacted Gijish, informing him that Hoffman had been kidnapped. Gijish replied that he would track him down as quickly as possible, but he was currently in a battle. Back in the elevator, Hoffman told the robot that he felt responsible for what had happened to the Persian kingdom, but killing him wouldn't change anything. The other guard then stopped the elevator and asked the robot to open the door. The robot stepped out, shoved the other guard against the wall, and smashed him. Hoffman then asked who he really was, and the robot responded, Bora. At that moment, police forces arrived at the helicopter pad and noticed cockroaches scattered on the ground, but they paid no mind. They then saw the robot dragging Hoffman on the ground, at which point Becker ordered to open fire on the robot. On the other side, Gijish continued battling against Pluto, firing his ammunition until Pluto caught him with his tail. Gijish informed Pluto that his body was made of zirconium, so thermal or magnetic rays wouldn't affect him. Gijish then freed himself from Pluto's grip, and Pluto quickly retreated, disappearing and leaving behind a massive cloud of dust. Gijish wondered if Pluto had buried himself alive. He then informed his superior Becker that he had captured the target and asked about Professor Hoffman's safety. Becker confirmed that Hoffman was fine and ordered Gijish to destroy the target. But just as Gijish aimed his gun at the target, he was startled to find that the surroundings had changed completely. He stood in the middle of a desert, surrounded by weeping citizens. Gijish claimed that these illusions wouldn't affect his artificial intelligence. The scene switched again, and Gijish found himself in a field of flowers, facing someone repeating, Pluto. He told the figure it was Saad and not Pluto. The scene shifted rapidly to reveal Saad, telling Abdullah that he received news he had been killed in the war. Abdullah assured him he was alive, but those people had robbed him of his wife Fatima, his daughter Lula, and his robotic brother Murad. Abdullah held Saad by the shoulders and urged him to save his country and avenge his family. Saad replied that vengeance breeds vengeance. Later, Abdullah asked Saad to let him implant his brain into the strongest bodies. They stood together before something as Abdullah's face lit up while he told Saad that he loved him. Meanwhile, Becker ordered Gijish to destroy the target, but Gijish refused, stating he was not programmed to destroy a robot that didn't intend to attack. Becker shouted at him to destroy the target to resolve the issue, but Gijish remained adamant in his refusal and requested a year-long leave. Becker informed him that he had been developed as a robotic investigator and did not have the right to resign. Gijish requested a leave for 1 year, then asked if Professor Hoffman was safe, confirming that he had reviewed the camera just moments ago. He inquired about the robot dragging Professor Hoffman, and then expressed that Professor Hoffman was in danger. At that point, someone called out to Gijish, requesting a hostage exchange. Gijish asked who they were, but the speaker instructed him to stay away from Pluto, and Hoffman would be released in return. Gijish moved away from Pluto despite Becker warning him that he was breaking the rules by acting without permission and would be severely punished. As soon as Gijish distanced himself from Pluto, the robot dragging Hoffman suddenly collapsed. Police rushed in quickly and seized the professor. On the other side, Gijish left the place, telling Saad that his father didn't love him. Then Gijish contacted Helena, who informed him she was ready for a work break. Gijish told her he had finished his work task too, and this time they would actually go to Japan. Helena mentioned he would join another mission, but he asked why they didn't apply to adopt a child. She reminded him they had done that before, to which Gijish replied that laws had evolved and robots had advanced. They could find a suitable child now, assuring her that if they had kids, he wouldn't feel lonely. Helena agreed with him, then Gijish ended the call, saying they would talk after he returned home. He then contacted Hoffman to check on him, who assured him he was fine and asked if he had been injured while confronting the monster. Gijish replied no. Hoffman warned him not to face the monster again, as his body wasn't in the best condition. At least they knew who was behind all those incidents. Gijish informed him that Abdullah was the culprit but was disturbed by Dr. Uechanamazo's statements, as he claimed the culprit was Dr. Guji. Hoffman ordered him him to rest for now, explaining that his body was made of zirconium, so he was suffering from metallic exhaustion. If he faced another shock, it would be over for him. At that moment, Gijist communicated that he felt he had uncovered the reality of his dreams, suggesting they might not haunt him again. Then Gijist disappeared before explaining anything to Hoffman. On the other side, military forces spread across the agricultural research facility in Zandam, conducting underground research. They reached the location where Gijist had cornered the target, and Becker ordered them to destroy the target upon sight. At Europol headquarters, Schilling commanded Becker to contact Gijist. Becker called Gijist, who was on his way to Amsterdam. Schilling explained that he was experiencing a malfunction in his artificial intelligence and needed immediate maintenance, followed by a report for the advisory committee. Gijist asked why he hadn't been punished, as he deserved execution for committing a crime. Why erase his memory instead of executing him? He abruptly ended the call and returned to the same flower shop, requesting a bouquet for his wife. When the florist asked what type of flowers he wanted, he told her that Saad was alive. The girl asked if Saad had done something wrong, and Gijist insisted Saad was not to blame. He then took the bouquet of roses and continued on, until he was confronted by the florist he had met in the Persian kingdom. He then asked why he was in the Netherlands. Suddenly, blurry memories flooded Gijist's mind before he collapsed on the ground, hit by the florist robot's projectile. Later, it was reported that a robotic agent had been killed yesterday in Old Amsterdam, with the deceased investigator Gijist being one of the world's most advanced robots. A small robot holding a cluster gun was found collapsed near Gijist's body, having suffered damage from the same weapon a few weeks earlier. Then events unfolded, and Hoffman met Uechanomizo, who was introduced to Helena, Gijist's wife. Uechanomizo bowed to her and offered his condolences. Helena mentioned that Gijist had been looking forward to visiting Japan, and that he had booked the trip before his death. Then Uechanomizo's guards signaled that they needed to leave before the media spotted them, so Helena accompanied them, while Uechanomizo and Hoffman lingered a bit longer. Uechanomizo asked if he thought Gijist's death was part of the series of crimes against robots, to which Hoffman replied that they were also in danger. At that point, Helena commented that the air in Japan, just as Gijist had described, smelled like soy sauce. Afterward, Helena wandered with Uechanomizo and Hoffman, and they noticed that Helena mimicked humans, pretending to enjoy her time. Hoffman remarked that it seemed Gijist's memory had been tampered with at Europol, to which Uechanomizo replied this didn't bode well. Hoffman admitted he had looked into it but hadn't found anything. He then glanced at Helena, saying he wanted to erase her memories for her sake, but she begged him not to wipe her memories of Gijist. Later, Helena met Dr. Tenma at the inn, handing him Gijist's memory chip and wondering if it would help identify the culprit. Helena expressed her inability to handle the immense sadness regarding Gijist's memories, and Tenma advised her that humans cry in such situations and encouraged her to mimic them in crying. Earlier, Professor Tenma recalled standing in front of a faceless robotic body in the lab. Abdullah stepped in and asked him about the robot's condition. Tenma replied, if that robot were human, it would say it's dreaming. When Abdullah tried to lift the robot's cover, Tenma stopped him, explaining that the synthetic skin was perfectly mimicking the 9.9 billion programmed personalities at an astonishing speed, so he couldn't imagine how ugly its face would be. Abdullah remarked that perhaps creating a perfect robot was ultimately impossible. He then asked Tenma how to awaken the robot. Tenma replied, there's one way, but it might turn the robot into a demon. At that moment, Okanamizu called Tenma, informing him that Helena, Gijist's wife, had returned to her country, and that he wished he could meet her since she was worried about Adam. Okanamizu continued, saying that scientists tend only to acknowledge technical results, but Helena's kindness deserves study. She seems to be on the same level as Adam. As Tenma continued walking, Okanamizu informed him that the National Parliament had set a date for Adam's official funeral. Entering another room, Tenma remembered Helena asking him, will Gijist's death be in vain? He grasped Gijist's memory chip and reassured her that he would take care of her husband's spirit. He recalled telling Abdullah earlier that he would add unbalanced emotions to awaken the robot. Thinking to himself, Tenma concluded that lamenting the imbalance was the simplest way to solve the randomness of the 9.9 billion. He then entered Adam's room, looking at Gijist's memory chip, and considered accepting the idea of turning him into a demon for the sake of awakening him. Meanwhile, Epsilon felt Gijist's hatred before he died, and wondered to whom Gijist had directed that hatred. Another robot approached Epsilon, informing him that he had a very powerful visitor. Later, the visitor introduced himself to Epsilon as Hogan from the Defense Agency at the Ministry of Science. Hogan noticed that it was raining heavily in Epsilon's area. He then shook Epsilon's hand and told him he had been assigned as his personal guard because he became the next target after investigator Gijist's death. Hogan added that his own strength was not at the same level as Epsilon's, but given that his powers continued thanks to photon energy despite the heavy rain, he must get him to a safe place. Epsilon asked about the kids, and Hogan replied that they couldn't be involved in this. Epsilon then said it was his birthday today, and the kids were planning a surprise party for him, even though he knew about it. Later, the kids threw a birthday party for Epsilon, giving him gifts including a necklace, a hat, and they made him a symbol resembling the sun because he loved it so much. One child told him that the sun would make him happy even on a rainy day like this. Epsilon replied that he was indeed happy. Nearby, Mrs. Griffith remarked that these children had lost their parents in the war, but for them, Epsilon was their son. On the other side, Wadley sat alone, and his companion asked him about the picture he drew of Epsilon, requesting him to show it to Epsilon. As Epsilon approached to view the picture, Wadley opened it to say, "Bora ate it." Then he began singing. The giant made a south pole in the desert, then released a river of fire, summoning drifting icebergs, and made it rain until a great flood occurred. Devoured by the giant were fire, icebergs, and all the rain, and then the earth itself. When Wadley finished, the kids laughed, thinking he had sung a song. Epsilon later sat alone for a moment, and Hogan reminded him that they needed to go, but Epsilon asked for 5 more minutes. He then contacted a robot named Arnold, and asked him if he had records of any abnormal weather events in Persia 3 years ago. He also showed him Wadley's drawing and asked if he knew anything resembling that image. Arnold quickly searched and said that 3 years ago in Persia, there was smoke akin to that caused by artillery shells on the battlefield. Arnold then asked Epsilon if some of the children he adopted were from that area. He quickly noticed there was something giant within the smoke, and Epsilon asked what it was. Arnold replied it was impossible to analyze the data. Hogan urged Epsilon to hurry, so Epsilon said goodbye to the kids, assuring them he'd be back later. The kids asked what would happen to the rest of the birthday party, and Epsilon explained he had an urgent task that came up last minute and asked them to be obedient until his return. Before he left, Epsilon glanced back one last time at Wadley, recalling his prior trip to Persia, where a soldier had warned him to watch his steps since the place was dark. Epsilon lit up the area, and then the officer told his commander he brought Epsilon with him. The commander asked Epsilon to dim his light and introduced himself as Colonel Scott from the UN forces, asking if he was the Epsilon who refused to join the army, noting that Epsilon had a slender build despite being a robot. Colonel Scott mocked Epsilon, labeling him a coward, but said at least he could help clean up after the war. He then took Epsilon to the basement and informed him that his task was to dissolve all the bodies of those robots, estimating that he would finish his work quickly thanks to his photon energy. Epsilon asked Scott in disbelief if he really had to do that to the robots. Scott explained that they were advanced robots from which the AI chips had been removed, so they were just a pile of puppets. Epsilon objected, mentioning he had heard that robot rights were recognized in Persia. He then asked Scott what happened to the AI chips after removal. Scott admitted he had no idea and ordered Epsilon to finish his task quickly. While standing there alone, Scott spoke to Epsilon through the intercom, announcing that the countdown for the operation had begun. Epsilon then detected a human voice, insisting someone was still in the area. Scott responded they had checked everywhere, and it was impossible for anyone to be alive, but Epsilon insisted on searching for the living body he had detected. Epsilon rushed outside to find the living body and spotted Wadley hiding amongst the debris. He implored Wadley to come out, and Wadley emerged trembling, uttering, "Bora." Soon, Scott and his forces arrived and informed Epsilon they would take care of the boy and that he just needed to complete his mission because time was tight. Epsilon returned to the robots and dissolved them with his energy. Later, he encountered Colonel Scott, who said it had been a long time since they met, but that he was now a general. Scott praised Epsilon, stating he had done excellent work back then, which resembled an explosion. Scott told Hogan that Epsilon possessed great power, and that it was absurd for them to think they would protect him. He also mentioned that the place resembled a fortress, and was a safe home too. However, considering Epsilon was the last advanced robot in the world, losing him would be a tremendous loss for the entire planet. Scott continued, based on the data they received from investigator Geigist, that the enemy's name was Pluto, but his brain had been implanted with AI from another robot named Sod. At that moment, Epsilon asked Scott what the term Bora meant, and its connection to the bodies of the robots he had just destroyed. Epsilon continued his inquiries, questioning why the Bora Investigative Committee was established in the first place, and why they found the robots' bodies. He told Scott that his own life was now in danger, and that this was no time for keeping secret since Pluto's power was terrifying. He warned that a greater force awaited them, one that involved the devouring of the Earth itself. Scott asked what he was talking about, to which Hogan replied it was the same song that the boy Wadley had sung. Meanwhile, Epsilon's children sang the same song while playing, while Wadley sat alone, and his companion told him that everyone loved his song. One of the girls asked the robot Deacon why he seemed lost in thought, and Deacon pointed to the sky. All the children turned their gaze toward Deacon's indication and opened their eyes in astonishment, while Epsilon on his end felt an impending danger heading towards the children. He told General Scott that they needed to return to Australia immediately. Meanwhile, for the children, a tornado began to emerge from the void, and black smoke started rising amidst everyone's shock. Back with Epsilon, he ordered the general to take his men and flee immediately. Scott stated that the defense system could respond to any attack. They weren't thinking of running because they weren't cowards like Epsilon. Epsilon firmly grasped Scott by the shoulders, insisting that they needed to leave now. Suddenly, a fiery force erupted, resembling an explosion, and both Epsilon and the robot Hogan were thrown into the air. When Epsilon insisted on returning to save the general and his men, Hogan told him it was too late as everyone had disappeared. Epsilon lamented that he was responsible for all of this. Hogan replied that there had been many chances for him to be targeted over the past 3 months, and it was very likely the general had also been on Pluto's hit list as part of the Bora investigation. Epsilon looked at the castle, now destroyed, noticing it resembled horns, and declared he needed to return to the boys immediately. At that moment, Hogan questioned the nature of the destructive force. Epsilon responded that it was the power of Bora and wondered what Bora truly was, if it was just a puppet. Simultaneously, Oran sat in school while Director Pan sat across from her. Oran informed him that she had just detected 2 enormous waves of sorrow in the world. The director glanced at the story of Pinocchio that Oran was reading and reminded her that Pinocchio struggled to understand the human heart. He told her she had a heart larger than most humans. Meanwhile, Epsilon's children waited for the tornado to reach them, wondering if they should flee or not. One of them suggested staying home, guessing they'd be safe if they remained there, while the tornado intensified alarmingly, continuing to swirl and create a dark storm. It began to gradually approach their home until it smashed into the glass, shattering it. At that moment, the children huddled together in a corner, scared. Suddenly, Hogan fell in front of them and urged them to gather around him. All the kids ran toward Hogan, who shielded them with his body, instructing them to crouch and protect their heads. Then Epsilon appeared as a beam of light and dove into the tornado, creating a massive fireball. At that moment, Wosley remembered when Epsilon first reached out to him, trying to save him. Now, 2 giant beams of light shot into the sky, breaking apart and raining down on them as pieces of an automated structure. The tornado started to disappear, and the children noticed 2 suns appearing in the sky. After that, Epsilon landed on the ground, and the kids gathered around him, except for Wosley, who stood back and called out Epsilon's name for the first time. Wosley thanked Epsilon profusely and broke down in tears, prompting Epsilon to embrace him in a touching scene. Meanwhile, Oren focused her gaze on a page in a book and said, "It's Pinocchio." The director asked what she meant, and Oren replied, "The sad child, just like Pinocchio, finds himself in a dark place like the belly of a whale wherever he goes. But he doesn't want to be a puppet or be controlled by anyone." Oren continued, saying, "This child thinks he acts on his own, but hatred controls him. Yet he is not the only one being manipulated. That's also true for Geppetto. He is just another puppet." She expressed a desire to talk to Geppetto more, but he had left. At the Ministry of Science, Tenma asked Okonomizu if he could request a postponement of Adam's formal funeral. Okonomizu readily agreed, and Tenma thanked him. On the other side, Epsilon's children were playing a game of tag, with Griffith encouraging Wosley to run faster so he wouldn't be caught by his friends. Wosley kept running until one of his companions brought him down. Then a woman asked if he was all right, while another child mentioned that Mr. Simon was coming. Mr. Simon approached and greeted Mrs. Griffith, commenting on the pleasant weather. He then inquired about Epsilon, and the woman informed him that Epsilon was in a hearing. Somewhere else, there was a meeting with Epsilon and several individuals, one of whom asked Epsilon if he had defeated his opponent. Epsilon confirmed he had, but the man expressed surprise that robots could lie. Epsilon insisted he had beaten his enemy, but another person asked why he then failed to protect General Scott, pointing out that everyone in the safe house vanished in an instant. Epsilon explained that this attack used a different weapon. The meeting members presented the scattered parts found near Epsilon's orphanage after the battle, asking Epsilon for his opinion. He remarked that it appeared to be the left arm of a robot from the Persian kingdom, originally designed for environmental development before being repurposed for military use. Then someone spoke to Epsilon, stating they were aware of his anti-war views but were concerned he might be too lenient with the enemy again. Epsilon replied that regardless of how many times they fought, the enemy would never be his rival. Meanwhile, Simon and Mrs. Griffith met. He told her that she surely knew what was being said about the orphanage and the whispers regarding Epsilon, the robot being a father to human children. Simon continued, saying the Child Services Agency had no issues with a prominent human like her in child care, but the problem was Epsilon. Griffith insisted that Epsilon loved these children more than any human. Simon responded that it would be better for humans to take care of these children. Simon then looked at his companion, Mr. Johansson, and mentioned that Mr. Johansson was ready to help in caring for the children. Johansson affirmed his commitment to providing a happy life for the child who would become his son. Simon noted that Mr. Johansson was one of the prominent figures in Oslo, to which Johansson replied that he and his wife had visited the place several times and were determined to help Wosley, hoping for positive feedback regarding him. Griffith asked him why he chose Wosley over all the other children. Suddenly, the assistant knocked on the door, announcing she had brought Wosley in. Johansson approached Wosley and tried to talk to him, but Wosley, scared, clung to the assistant's clothes. Johansson asked if he had ever seen snow, and just as Griffith was about to tell Johansson that Wosley didn't want to go with him, Simon whispered to her that Johansson was willing to pay a large sum to the orphanage. He then asked if she would deny a child the opportunity to be adopted by perfect parents just because he didn't want to. Later, Epsilon arrived back at the orphanage, greeted by the children who ran towards him. Griffith instructed them to let Epsilon rest, as he must be tired. Epsilon then noticed Wosley was missing, and when he asked about him, the children told him that Wosley had gone with the wealthy man. Epsilon shouted at Griffith, questioning what was happening happening and where Wasley was. The assistant said he had gone to Oslo, while Griffith claimed there was no other choice. Somewhere, Johansson was instructing Wasley to keep walking behind him, asking how many times he would stop. Wasley slowly followed Johansson, who told him that his task would end as soon as he led him through that door and warned him not to be a nuisance. Elsewhere, Hogan informed Epsilon that he had traced Wasley, revealing that he had been taken to the Vigeland Castle in Oslo, but the man who took Wasley, Johansson, was nowhere to be found. At the other end, Johansson opened the door and brought Wasley inside, telling someone he had brought the boy. When Wasley entered and saw Abdullah's face, he was shocked and stepped back, repeating in fear, "Bora." Abdullah placed his hand over Wasley's mouth, demanding he not scream too loud or he would be punished. He then dragged Wasley with him, saying he was a bad boy for seeing Bora, but promised that Epsilon would come to rescue him. Abdullah forced Wasley to see Pluto, causing Wasley to faint. Meanwhile, Abdullah continued speaking to the beast, saying he had come that distance for it, and there was no option for failure left. He urged it to kill Epsilon because he was the last one left, assuring it that everything would end after that, and confirmed to the beast that he would win even with one arm. Epsilon later donned the armor gifted to him during the Asian War, and told Hogan that he hadn't needed it back then because he had refused to enlist. He then took Hogan with him, explaining that Vasily's life was at risk, and the army could move at any moment, but he knew he was the target. Hogan asked why Epsilon hadn't eliminated his opponent, guessing that he must have had a chance to kill him. Epsilon didn't answer and told Hogan he would go alone because he didn't want more casualties. However, Hogan insisted on coming along, claiming he would protect Vasily. At the Vigeland fortress, Abdullah told Pluto that Epsilon would arrive any moment, commanding him to finish things before sunrise. Just then, Vasily, who was tied up, screamed and began repeating, "Bora!" Abdullah attempted to hit Vasily with a stick, but Pluto broke the stick. Abdullah asked, surprised, if he was challenging his father. Since when had he acted this way with his creator? Abdullah then firmly told Pluto that he could return to his original body as soon as this battle was over. On the other hand, Epsilon and Hogan arrived at the fortress. Epsilon said he was picking up a signal indicating Vasily's presence, so he would enter the fortress. Hogan reminded him he was a photon-powered automaton, so he should wait until sunrise. Epsilon insisted he needed to save Vasily as quickly as possible, and snuck inside the fortress, with Hogan following him. Just as they stood in front of Pluto's room, Pluto pierced the door, grabbed Epsilon by the tail, and slammed him against the wall. At that moment, Epsilon ordered Hogan to save Vasily immediately. Then a tremendous energy surged from Epsilon as Pluto lifted him by the tail. Epsilon expressed that his energy was beginning to drain while Hogan went in to examine Vasily. Meanwhile, Abdullah ordered Pluto to eliminate Epsilon, but as Pluto cornered Epsilon, he kept repeating, "The boy." Epsilon asked if he meant Vasily. At that moment, Hogan called out to Epsilon, reassuring him that Vasily was safe. Epsilon confirmed Vasily's safety and inquired whether Sod was inside Pluto and what Bora was. As the sun began to rise, Abdullah yelled at Pluto to end Epsilon. Then Pluto asked Epsilon for help. On the other side, Oren stood before Tobio Tenma's grave, when suddenly Tenma appeared and told Oren she was the one who placed flowers on his son's grave. Oren informed him she was Adam's younger sister. Tenma was astonished, exclaiming, "A machine visiting a grave? Amazing!" He continued, praising Oren as a masterpiece of Ochanamizu art, and asked if she knew how Tobio was in heaven. Oren admitted she didn't know about heaven but sensed how sad he was. Tenma then asked if she understood the depths of the heart. Oren replied that she felt two emotions coming from somewhere far away. There was an immense sadness emanating from two sources. Meanwhile, the sun gradually illuminated the surroundings. While Abdullah screamed at Pluto to finish Epsilon, Pluto asked Epsilon why he hadn't been killed last time. Epsilon replied that the waves he had emitted earlier told him Pluto was sad. Pluto then requested that Epsilon kill him now. A massive fire ignited, and a blue light energy emitted from Epsilon simultaneously. Pluto urged Epsilon to use his photon energy to melt him away and begged him to kill him. Quickly, the scene shifted, and Epsilon found himself transported to a field of flowers, with Sod standing before him. Epsilon told him they needed to look for his original body to restore the AI to its original form. Epsilon reached out his hand to Sod, who cried and informed him that Bora must be coming. On the other side, the sun disappeared again, and a massive storm of black smoke appeared in front of Hogan and Vasily, resembling a whirlwind that enveloped them. Epsilon shouted, questioning what was happening, and enveloped Vasily and Hogan with his photon energy to protect them from the cyclone. Meanwhile, Dr. Tenma took Oren to see her brother Adam. Back with Epsilon, Pluto cut off his head, and then Epsilon experienced jumbled memories of his children. As for Adam, he finally awakened and opened his eyes. Oran asked if he recognized her, and then called for Dr. Tenma, who told her he had added unbalanced emotions to Adam and had only been waiting for him to wake up. However, when Tenma began analyzing Adam's data, he was surprised by strange numbers, and Oren informed him that a great deal of sorrow had suddenly appeared just before Adam woke up. On the other side, Hogan embraced Vasily, preventing him from looking toward Epsilon, who had transformed into scattered light rays. The morning sun returned, and the massive shadow, along with Pluto, vanished. Vasily held Epsilon's hands, which had protected him and Hogan during the battle by releasing photon energy, continuing to cry. At that moment, Hogan saluted, saying that Epsilon wasn't a coward who shirked enlistment. He was a brave warrior. Meanwhile, Tenma left after telling Oren that she certainly read a lot of books, which explained her poetic expression, but she didn't really understand emotions. When Oran tried to stop him, she was surprised to see Adam standing up. She asked if he knew her, and Adam called out for Epsilon and Gygasht, then stated there was a crack and the earth would shatter. In Eden National Park, a tour guide was explaining to a group that long ago, in the land of Monokachi, there lived a tribe called Nanabu. The Nanabu people were peaceful and hated fighting until one day, another tribe arrived with gold on ships. They told the Nanabu that owning gold would bring happiness. The Nanabu traded some of their horses for gold, and rumors about the gold spread quickly. Soon, the Nanabu gave up all their horses, as well as their homes and valuable lands, based on the advice of the gold-bearing tribe. In the end, the Nanabu lost everything and migrated to Mount Manabunzo, where they began throwing themselves into its volcanic crater one by one. Their spirits transformed into a great giant, who now sleeps within the volcano. However, legend has it that this giant will awaken one day in Eden National Park. After the guide finished telling the legend, she informed the group that they would be moving to the local reserve. In another location, where a puppet sat in a chair, the leader of Thracia stated that the plan had been executed exactly as intended. He then glanced at images of the most advanced robots in the world, claiming that everyone was dead and that Thracia would remain prosperous forever. In Eden National Park, the guide introduced the group to Tsitsi Mar, the tribe's elder, whose role is to ward off evil. One person asked the guide if she could translate what the elder was saying, and she began to interpret his words. The elder repeated that there was an evil spirit lurking underground, and that spirit would unleash its fury upon the world. At the Ministry of Science, researchers told Uchanamezu that they had completed the transfer and were prepared to face anything, no matter what. Uchanamezu, accompanied by his researchers, entered the observation room and inquired about what they expected would happen once Adam awoke. He then asked if Dr. Tenma's location had been pinpointed, to which one researcher replied negatively, making Uchanomezu wonder what Dr. Tenma had done with Adam. Later, Oren mentioned that Tenma had added a specific program to Adam. Uchanomezu asked her what program it was, and Oren continued, expressing that when Adam awakened, she felt a great sadness exploding somewhere in the world. Suddenly, one researcher ran in, informing Uchanomezu that Adam wanted a pen. However, when they gave Adam the pen, he created massive chaos. As Uchanomezu rushed to see the mess Adam had made, Oran followed him, but Uchanomezu ordered her out of the observation room. Oran began shouting, questioning what Adam was writing, while another researcher asked Uchanomezu about the equation Adam was drafting. Uchanomezu replied that it was a plan for an anti-proton bomb, a formula for destroying the Earth. In that moment, the researcher was stunned, and as Adam finished writing the equation and dropped the pen, Uchanomezu remarked that Adam had just completed an equation that could destroy the Earth. Meanwhile, Tenma went to visit Brow, who expressed it was a great honor to receive a famous robotic scientist. Tenma then mentioned that Adam had awakened. Brow asked if Adam had sent a morning greeting from son to father, to which Tenma replied he was astounded because he had just learned that as well. Brow said that when an AI like Adam awakes, others notice. Tenma told Brow he believed Adam was the only AI that could be compared to him. Then he asked Brow if he would answer a question if he agreed to fix him. Meanwhile, Uchanomezu was trying to analyze the data collected from Adam, stating he would no longer rely on Dr. Tenma's help because he would restore Adam to what he once was. Suddenly, a researcher burst in, telling Uchanomezu they had an emergency because Adam had escaped. Uchanomezu observed how Adam had broken through the walls, exclaiming in disbelief that those walls were supposed to be impenetrable. As he wondered where Adam had gone, he instructed the researcher to call in the army to track Adam using his GPS. Later, Uchanomezu pinpointed Adam's location, declaring he was in Kodanshida, a place not far from them. Uchanomezu recalled when Tenma had told him he had awakened the perfect robot by adding unbalanced emotions. He also remembered what Oren had said about Dr. Tenma adding a program to Adam. Meanwhile, Brow asked Tenma if he had added the memory of Gygash to Adam, especially the data that included the memory of his last moments. In another place, Adam was walking in the rain, and at the spot where the puppet was trapped, she told the leader of Thracia that Adam was alive and filled with an immense amount of hatred. The man responded that robots could not feel hatred. The puppet questioned him if he believed that robots couldn't hate or cry, nor did they know the feeling of hatred. Meanwhile, Uchanomezu was running through the streets searching for Adam, while Adam, at the same time, stood in the rain in front of a barricade. Adam quickly grabbed the barricade, and suddenly, a memory flooded back of a woman asking the police to save her son. During this moment, investigator Gygash arrived and showed his badge to the other officers, who immediately stated that the perpetrator did not want to negotiate. He then set up a barricade a distance away from them. Gygash asked about the perpetrator's weapons, and one detective replied that the suspect had a military-grade, recoilless machine gun. Gygash then approached the barricade, and suddenly, the suspect fired a shot, which Gygash narrowly avoided. Gygash dashed forward and stopped in front of the suspect just steps away, aiming his weapon at him. At that moment, the suspect threatened to kill him if he got any closer, but Gygash spoke with the kidnapped child, Kurt, telling him he was a robot robot police officer and that his gun would only kill the evildoer. He promised not to hurt Kurt, but the child had to remain still. Kurt began to cry, and the suspect threatened to blow off the child's head. Gyjish then instructed Kurt to think of those he loved. The child repeated, "Mom, Dad." Gyjish then fired his shot, and the suspect fell to the ground. Gyjish jumped to rescue Kurt, holding him in his arms, saying he was incredible. The child then ran to his father and mother, hugging them tightly. After the day ended, a scrap collector arrived and asked Gyjish to step aside so he could do his work. The worker grumbled about the chaos the criminal had caused, explaining he would have to check for recyclable parts before crushing everything. The scrap collector began lifting pieces of robots, saying he might make a lot of money if he sold those parts to a robot hospital. Suddenly, Gyjish noticed something and asked the crane operator to drop it. When he examined the object, he found a robot moving inside it. The crane operator held the robot up, stating its condition was worse than dead, as it was an old model with nothing usable left. However, Gyjish took it from the operator. The worker then told him he would give him the entire robot body for 500 Zeos. Later, Gyjish carried the robot in his arms and called Helena to say he was coming home, and the events quickly unfolded. Helena and Gigi watched as the robot walked, and Helena asked Gigi if this child was truly theirs. Gigi assured her that it was their child, and that he finally understood the meaning of life because of him. The robot then called them his parents, prompting Helena to say they needed to name him. Gigi decided to name him Robita. However, someone later killed the robot Robita and stole him, then threw the bag in front of Gigi, apologizing for his mistake. Gigi, in turn, shot the attacker and killed him. As things progressed, Gigi recalled telling Adolf that he feared nothing but himself after learning what hatred felt like. The scene changed, showing Gigi taking a hit from a flower-selling robot, and he fell to the ground, stating there was no point in hatred. Suddenly, Adam snapped back to reality after finishing that memory slideshow of Gigi, only to be approached by Ochanomizu, who called to him worriedly. Adam reassured him that he was fine now, and Ochanomizu hugged him tightly, declaring that hatred had disappeared. Meanwhile, Tenma told Bravo that one might think hatred had faded, but hatred and sorrow never truly vanish. They continue to simmer quietly. Bravo agreed completely and asked Tenma where Abdullah was. Bravo replied there was no need to look for Abdullah, as he would come to them himself. Afterward, Tenma left Bravo's place and got into a car, telling the driver to head to the airport. Suddenly, the driver turned around and shot a red light at Tenma that resembled laser, causing Tenma to lose consciousness immediately. On the other side, Ochanomizu, Tawash, and Nakamura gathered around Adam, who told them that Dr. Tenma had implanted Gigi's memory chip inside him. He would reveal the truth about what Gigi discovered in his investigation. Adam continued, stating that Darius XIV had a plan to turn his desert kingdom into fertile land when he was a dictator in the Persian kingdom and ordered Professor Abdullah to create a soil-altering robot. They named this plan the Bora Project. Tawash remarked that Bora was not a weapon of mass destruction. Adam explained that the Bora Project faced many setbacks, as every prototype robot created by Abdullah had failed, and those prototypes were disposed of. Those were the same prototypes Professor Ochanomizu and the others found in the robot graveyard. Then, Professor Abdullah had an idea to continue the Bora Project, realizing he needed an assistant with capabilities beyond that of human essentially, a robot with more advanced artificial intelligence. To achieve this goal, a certain scientist was invited to the Persian kingdom. Ochanomizu stated that this scientist was Dr. Tenma. In another location, Dr. Tenma woke up tied up, and at that moment, Abdullah appeared and told him he had heard about Adam being revived. Tenma asked if he had kidnapped him to lure Adam, but Abdullah untied Tenma, saying it was no longer necessary. Tenma inquired why he had brought him there, and Abdullah pointed to a large object nearby. Tenma asked in disbelief if it was Pluto, and Abdullah confirmed it was Bora, a masterpiece created by a genius scientist named Guji. Abdullah continued, stating his plan was to implant his brain into Bora, consequently creating the most advanced robot in the world, and the only one capable of doing that was Professor Tenma. Tenma then looked at Abdullah in silence. On the other side, Adam revealed that Professor Abdullah lost his entire family in the war, which made him hate the world. Adam added that Professor Abdullah himself was killed in the war. Tawash and Nakamura expressed disbelief because they had met him not long ago. Tenma confronted Abdullah, stating he was neither human nor a real person, to which Abdullah argued he was closer to a robot since he had lost most of his body in the war. Tenma reminded him he was a robot and had known him for a long time, as he had made him after Abdullah requested him to create the perfect robot, which made Abdullah laugh. Tenma continued, saying, the intelligence of that perfect robot was too advanced, that's why it never awakened. He then recalled the war in the Persian kingdom and received the news of Professor Abdullah's death during the bombing of the Timur area. At that moment, the police showed a recording of Professor Abdullah while they tried to rescue him from the rubble. Abdullah told Tenma that there was a memory chip containing a copy of a specific part of his brain, requesting the police to hand it to him. Tenma obtained the chip from the police, realizing it contained Abdullah's hatred. Later, he added that chip into the perfect robot at Abdullah's request, and indeed, the operation was successful. The robot awakened with Abdullah's face. Meanwhile, Ochanomizu, Nakamura, and Tawash came to understand the truth about Abdullah based on Adam's words. Back to Abdullah, he told Tenma that he was lying. Tenma pointed out that the most advanced artificial intelligence could also lie lie to others and himself. Tenma confronted Abdullah with the fact that the genius scientist Guji did not exist. He himself was Guji. Adam reiterated to the others that Guji was Abdullah, a robot born with a dual personality. Going back to Tenma, he told Abdullah that he didn't need him to perform the implantation since his artificial intelligence had been transferred to other robots. Abdullah then collapsed, accusing Tenma of lying. Tenma informed him that the whole world understood his suffering, and it was time to stop him. Then, Professor Tenma began to shut down Abdullah, but as he started that process, Abdullah collapsed, and a swarm of insects burst out from him. Tenma then noticed Abdullah's electronic brain was missing. On the other side, Adam declared, Bora is no longer a robot designed to produce plant life. It has become a weapon of mass destruction. Tawash insisted they needed to inform everyone immediately. Adam replied that it was too late, as the whole Earth would now be destroyed. At Dr. Tenma's location, a powerful sandstorm erupted, scattering bright shards. Meanwhile, the 108th military court session convened. Just before Darius could take the oath, everyone began feeling an earthquake that gradually intensified. Darius recalled when he was about to commit suicide, and at that moment, Abdullah had stopped him, saying that Pluto was finally completed, so they would take their revenge, even holding a Bora investigation committee accountable. Darius told him that Thracia had caused much harm. On the other side, the Thracian leader was informed that the robot Arnold predicted an imminent volcanic eruption. The president remarked that they would save many lives thanks to this robot. Arnold then noted that the volcanic eruption was expected to unfold in Eden National Park. They examined the Eden Park area and discovered a large lava pool lying 8 kilometers below the surface, containing 3,000 cubic kilometers of lava. The president then questioned Arnold about the volcano's potential explosion. Arnold replied that it erupts every 5,000 years, the last being 5,200 years ago, but if it erupted, it would spew 100 million tons of ash and cinders per hour, devastating areas within several hundred kilometers. Arnold proceeded to outline the aftermath the volcano would cause, emphasizing that most forms of biological life would perish within a few months. Suddenly, the court judge connected with the president, broadcasting Darius's trial, where he claimed a massive bomb was about to explode beneath Thracia. The Thracian president rushed to the puppet, and there he learned from the puppet that the robots would survive the explosion along with 10% of the Earth's population. The puppet informed him that these survivors would be a gift to him. On the other side, Arnold contacted Okanamizu, informing him that if the anti-proton bomb continued moving toward Eden Park, the volcano would erupt. Okanamizu analyzed the data and predicted the explosion would occur within 72 hours. Arnold then noted that this time frame coincided with the 4th anniversary of Professor Abdullah and his family's loss. Arnold continued, stating, Bora can only be deterred when it approaches the surface to cause a volcanic eruption, but Adam was the only robot who could stop it. Adam declared he would take care of it, but needed to go somewhere first. He went to meet Bravo, asked him about the next threat, and they engaged in a brief discussion before Adam concluded. Just before leaving, Bravo requested to touch Adam. Somewhere else, a couple informed Helena that they had always dreamed of living in a home like this. Helena bid them farewell, saying she would meet them later about the garden layout, then continued her way when Adam crossed her path, telling her that Gegisht is inside him. Adam explains that he was able to return to life thanks to Gegisht. At this, Helena hugged him, and Adam told her that Gigi was always thinking of her until the last moment of his life. He reassured her that she wouldn't be alone even after his departure. Helena cried and asked, is he trying to cheer her up? Adam replied that robots do not lie. Helena said that she recently realized that she and Gegisht had lost memories from a certain period of their lives, but she wonders if Gegisht has regained those memories. Adam replied that Gegisht hasn't recovered any lost memories. As they parted ways, Helena asked Adam to visit her again. After Adam left, she thought that Adam had just lied to her about Gegisht's memories. Later, Adam visited Gegisht's grave, saying he was paying his respects because this might be his end. Then, Adam set off to stop Bora and soon reached the destination, but Pluto blocked his path. Adam rushed toward Pluto and slammed him against the wall, causing destruction all around. The roles then reversed as Pluto struck Adam against the wall with his tail, trying to break through, but Adam managed to grab him, declaring he would destroy him. Adam broke off a part of Pluto, telling him that his hatred was greater than Pluto's, reminding him that Mont Blanc loved the forests and North loved music, preferring not to fight while he had killed everyone. Pluto attempted to crush Adam in his grip, but Adam opened his hand and reminded him that Brando cherished his family, and that Hercules and Brando were friends even as rivals, both not wanting to die. Even Epsilon was against the war and refused to enlist. Then, Pluto wrapped his tail around Adam, who continued, saying that Epsilon adopted war orphans and loved them. Adam then lured Pluto downward and knocked him to the ground, stating that within him were the feelings of Gegisht and his hatred. Meanwhile, Orin said she would go stop Adam because Pluto still had some goodness inside him, so he wasn't using his tornado. But Director Pan stopped her, saying they couldn't do anything at that moment. Meanwhile, Ochanamizu was on a plane chasing Adam, with the robots tracking Adam's location 75 kilometers away. At the same time, Adam was preparing to deliver the final blow to Pluto. Then he saw memories of all the robots that had died, but ultimately saw Gegisht telling him that hatred was futile. Adam collapsed to the ground, and at that moment, Pluto got up and broke down in tears. Adam asked him, "Why are you crying?" To which Pluto replied that he didn't know the reason. Later, both of them lay next to each other. Pluto said, "Humans say that if they wish upon a shooting star, their dreams come true." Adam asked, asked, "If you wished for something?" Pluto replied, "Of course." Adam then told him, "I wished for the same thing." Then Adam said, "It's time to go," and shot up, falling into the volcano. On the other hand, Okanamizu was warned that Eden Park was in a dangerous state, but he insisted on landing the plane. Then Tenma contacted Okanamizu, saying that Adam might have killed Pluto, but the problem was Bora, as even Adam couldn't stop him because Bora carried all of Abdullah's hatred that overwhelmed others. Tenma stated that the land was doomed to destruction. Okanamizu told him that even if the fate of all humans was death, they would never lose hope. Before Okanamizu got off the plane, he told Tenma that he was a genius scientist. Just as he had created Goji, he also created Adam. Meanwhile, the weather watchers were monitoring earthquakes, saying it was happening due to the instability of the Earth's crust in Eden Park. On the other hand, the doll told the president that she would protect him, but he would be her slave for the rest of his life. Ochanomizu and Nakamura arrived at the volcano's crater, where Ochanomizu said Adam was trying to disable Bora and the anti-proton bomb, but he feared Adam's body would melt in the process. At the same time, Adam was telling Bora that Gaijist had taught him that hatred was futile and must come to an end. Then Bora launched numerous shards at Adam, who realized that he needed to disable the bomb within 5 minutes before his body started to melt. Suddenly, Pluto grabbed Adam's body in his hands, stating he would protect him. Bora began attacking them, but Pluto was dodging. He ordered Adam to send him the bomb schematics, and after Adam did that, Pluto said his wish was to turn the Earth into fields of flowers. He then asked Adam to tell Orin that he was grateful to her for drawing with him. Pluto detached his fist from the rest of his body, and his hand shot upward, carrying Adam inside it. Then Pluto's arm returned after pulling Adam from the volcano's mouth. At that point, Adam fell to the ground, and Ochanomizu and Nakamura ran toward him while Adam kept repeating Sehud's name. Then an enormous explosion erupted inside the volcano, immediately propelling Adam, Ochanomizu, and Nakamura away. After that, they all noticed that the sky had a patch resembling a field of flowers, and Adam said, "Sehud saved the Earth." On the other side, the doll told the leader of Thrakia that the explosion had calmed, but she could create another plan. The president begged her not to do that, and suddenly, the robot Bravo's arm stretched out from somewhere after being freed, grabbing the Thrakia president's neck and stabbing him, revealing that the doll was actually the robot Bravo. Meanwhile, Adam asked Okonomizu about hatred, and Okonomizu replied that he hoped one day hatred would disappear.